Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today is November, that's right, November 3rd. It's election day. If you haven't already voted, please vote. Make a plan. Don't say I'll do it later. Make a plan right now and go vote. If you did already vote, thank you. No matter who you voted for, you had a say in what goes on in this country over the next 2 to 4 years, and a say in how your life is affected by it. So if you voted again, thank you. If you haven't voted, please do so. If you haven't registered, there are a lot of states where you can register day of. If you are in one of those states, take advantage of it. Anyway, I hope you're healthy and well and ready for an exciting day here on TechStrong TV as we try to bring you some great content, news, information, hope making your workday go a little faster. I know many of us are actually off today for Election Day in the U.S., but in the rest of the world, we hope you enjoy what we have in store for you today. Let me tell you a little bit about what that is. First of all, our friend Brendan O'Leary from GitLab is going to tell us about the latest release of GitLab. You know, the 22nd of every month they release. This latest release is GitLab 13.5. It has some significant new features, and Brendan will tell us about it. More importantly, I hope to have in place in time for the next GitLab release on November 22nd, a new monthly series that will highlight the GitLab releases, hosted by Brendan himself. But for now, it's me interviewing Brendan. After that, I have another new company to well, it's not a new company to TechStrong TV called Contentful, and I introduce you to Paolo Negri. Paolo is the CTO, co-founder at Contentful. They have a headless CMS that decouples the content from the application, and it gives a lot of freedom to developers, DevOps, and content providers in terms of kind of setting that content free among multiple channels. So interesting play there at Contentful. They've really done well too. They are. This is not a 5-man startup. After that, we are joined by Fletcher Heisler of Veracode. Veracode recently came out with their annual security survey, and we speak to Fletcher a little bit about that, as well as the importance of education and training for security and developers. So good stuff there. After that, we're going to do our something old. We're going to go back, just 2 weeks, so it's not that old, to DevOps Experience, and a keynote there from Akash Tayal and Bob Wong of Deloitte's cloud team, scaling DevOps across the enterprise. It's a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. I think you will as well. After that, let's see. We have our Chief Content Officer and Managing Editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who's going to give you the news of headlines and articles across the media ops community. We then have an interview with Vasant Balasubramanian. I'm sure I messed that one up. But Charlene has that, as well as a great webinar preview for all the great webinars we have for you here this week on Media Ops. After that, I'll be back. Actually, Charlene has one other one, I think. Wias Issa, CEO of Ubek Security. So another good one there from Charlene. And then I'll be back to introduce the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley's also loaded up today with 3 great videos. One is with our friends at Axelos, the people behind Idle. And this is the first of 4 video interviews with them. Second is with the folks at Perforce. And, you know, Perforce is an interesting company. They made a lot of acquisitions recently. Mitchell and his video will tell you what they're up to now. And then last, we have Brian Singer, CPO at Noble 9. Also an interesting company that I think you'll enjoy Mitchell's interview with. So a lot of stuff from Mitchell and Charlene today. Great stuff. Plus what we've got in store. That'll probably take us at least 3 hours today. I hope you're going to enjoy it. I know you will if you're paying attention. We're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back with our first guest. As I mentioned, our first guest today is Brendan O'Leary from GitLab. Brendan, of course, is our go-to guy to find out what's happening at GitLab. And, you know, the 22nd of every month, GitLab drops a release. This month's release was GitLab 13.5. Brendan's going to tell us all about it. Here now is my interview with Brendan O'Leary.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another segment here on TechStrong TV. For this segment, familiar face and name here, my friend Brendan O'Leary, Senior DevOps Evangelist or Developer Evangelist at GitLab. Hey, Brendan, I feel like we just spoke.
Yeah, it was not too long ago, which is great because you were worried that we hadn't spoken very long. So now we're
that's why now, you know, it doesn't take much. It's kind of Pavlovian, right? I set that and boom, all of a sudden I've got you scheduled here 5 times.
Exactly.
But seriously, though, we missed our normal 22nd of the month interview because, of course, or the 23rd of the month, because the 22nd is GitLab release day. And this month was a big release, 13.5. I believe, right?
GitLab 13.5. We're really excited about it.
Yep. So, truth be told, partially my fault. I was actually off. Well, the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, the 23rd, 22nd was a Friday, and I was out for my birthday weekend. So,
well, happy birthday!
Thank you. It had, you know, I probably had a better time celebrating the birthday than being here in the office doing videos. But anyway, Brendan, give us highlights. 13.5. What's big in GitLab 13.5?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks, Alan. Yeah. Well, as you know, one of GitLab's core values is collaboration, and that's obviously a key part of DevOps as well. And so we're really excited about a lot of collaboration features that are in 13.5. To help folks collaborate, you know, amongst their teams or across their different tools or with.
You know what? Peers. Time out. Stop. Brendan's not moving, Paul.
He's frozen.
Oh, hello.
Brendan, do you hear me?
I do. I can hear you.
Oh, now you're back.
Okay.
Froze.
All right. We are going to take it back. I'm going to go back to when I said I was out on my birthday.
Great.
And we'll go back from there. Paul, you're going to have to splice it up. So, you know, not entirely GitLab's fault. I was out on my birthday. The 23rd, of course, was a Friday. But Brendan, what did I miss? What's the big story around GitLab 13.5?
Sure. Hey, Alan. And then we're really excited to give you 13.5 for your birthday. As you know, one of GitLab's core values is collaboration. And so this release really focuses on that. It's also a key part of DevOps, right? This collaboration with your teams or across your tools or with your peers. And so there's a number of things. So group wikis, that's a huge thing that a lot of our customers have been looking for. It's actually the most upvoted issue in our issue tracker. So we're really excited to ship that. Snippets across groups, and also a generic package registry. So as you know, we have lots of package registries to cover different kinds of tools. So like Maven or NPM. But the generic package registry lets anyone who has some binary they want to publish and be able to collaborate on publish that out. So we're really excited about that.
Absolutely. So 13.5 will forever be known as Alan's birthday release. But now collaboration is a big thing, Brendan. You know, no kidding around. We spoke. It was a week or two ago about integration with HashiCorp. Right. And so collaborating with other tools, with other team members continues to drive. I'm wondering, collaboration working in remote, of course, GitLab's a remote organization, but collaboration working in remote, environments, has that kind of found its way anywhere in GitLab in this release or recent releases or maybe in the roadmap?
It has. I mean, it's something that's always top of mind for us because, like you said, we're a remote organization. We have been even prior to the pandemic. And so we use GitLab to build GitLab. And I think a lot of the lessons that other DevOps teams can learn are the lessons of open source, right? And so, open source has also always been remote, and developers and engineers can come together and collaborate, if they have the right tools, no matter where they are in the world. And so I think that what we're seeing is in enterprises who have been trying to adopt DevOps, trying to kind of adopt this, CI/CD DevOps kind of methodology, they're now seeing that kind of transformation accelerated even more, as now their groups are remote and they can't rely on, chatter in the office to keep their process flowing. And we've seen that with a lot of our customers. So for instance, in 13.5, another huge feature I'm really excited about is mobile application security scanning. And that feature actually comes to us from a customer. So our MVP, we have an MVP of someone who contributes the best feature from outside of GitLab engineering. And that goes to HEB Digital this month for contributing that back directly to GitLab. And so again, whether they're a GitLab engineer collaborating remotely, or even our customers who are collaborating on GitLab remotely, I think we can take a lot of those lessons learned from how open source projects do it.
That's cool. That's cool as heck. Let's talk about that. So what does the mobile app security scanning do, Brendan?
Right. Yeah. So this again comes in from a customer, and it's our lead feature actually in our blog post about 13.5. So it enables you to do testing of iOS and Android apps, static application security testing against those types of apps. And again, it was something that a customer of ours, HEB Digital, needed. And they were able to contribute directly back to GitLab, which is a great, testament to how we're really building a DevOps platform and a CI/CD tool that is kind of not only our best guess at what that should be, but really the industry best practices around what that should look like, because our customers are able to collaborate with us and add things in that we might not have thought of. Right? We don't publish a mobile app. HEB Digital obviously does, and that's become a critical part of their business in the pandemic as folks figure out how they can get food and groceries and all these things safely. Yep. And so they contributed that back to GitLab, and we're so happy to have it.
So what static scanner is that, using the in-house GitLab scanner, or is it plug into other static scanners? Do you know?
So it does both. So this is a built-in. This particular feature is built-in security for, I believe it's for Swift-based apps, as well as Kotlin-based Android apps. But you can also plug in. So part of that, working well with others, we have a number of third-party security scanners, right? We would call third-party. That is security scanners written by someone outside of GitLab, right? Like a Black Duck or White Source. Like those kinds of scanners that you can actually also integrate directly into GitLab. So you can have,
love it. You
can have it out of the box. You've got some sort of security scanning, but if you have, a specific tool that you need for something else, you can also bring that.
What a great feature, and kudos to the HEB team. Right, that's it's good stuff. So, but Brendan, wait, there's more. Right. So what else do we have in 13.5?
Yeah, so we've obviously have a huge investment in Kubernetes ourselves, and we see that as a big leading factor. You and I last time we talked, I think, talked a little bit about our GitLab Kubernetes agent, where you can use a kind of a pull GitOps methodology to have an agent sitting in your Kubernetes cluster, monitoring repositories for changes and pulling those changes in. That's actually been released in our official Linux package, so that'll make it a lot easier for folks to install that agent. If they want.
Love it.
And then another thing that comes for Kubernetes is cluster cost management data. So we use a cost modeling from KubeCosts to actually bring costs of running your cluster, right? What is the node cost? What is the cost of each namespace? Bring that data into GitLab so you can see, okay, how are the changes or the people that we're bringing into our cluster? How's that impacting the cost of running that? So we're really, really excited to bring that data all the way back to the code, because we think that's, again, the benefit you can get from a single DevOps platform is having all of the data that's important to running and deploying software centralized in one place so you can understand how it all impacts each other.
Yeah, no, that also sounds great stuff. Would that be kind of, would we classify that as GitOps, part of the GitOps thing, or not? It's kind of out.
I mean, I think it has a relationship there, right? Because if you're doing GitOps, you're hopefully enabling your teams to move a lot faster, which is great. On the other hand, you want to keep that governance and control, especially in the large enterprise, and you want to understand how that's impacting costs, right? You don't want, we're adopting GitOps, and that just means that everybody can spin up all the infrastructure they want, and it can be unused, and we get to pay for it. Right. So I think it's kind of like a yin and a yang. It's making sure that we can deliver better products faster and do it with the same security and governance we expect in an enterprise.
I mean, a recent interest of mine is just, we shift left. I'm not saying we're done shifting left, but I think people get it, and a lot of people are doing it. But how do we better integrate, security left in the process, right? And a lot of it has to happen to Git. I had an interview with one of my friends in the security world this week, Brendan, and we were talking about how do you get security champions in the developer and the DevOps teams? So not the security guys or gals who may be crossing over and helping out. There's not enough of them. We need to make security champions within the developer ranks, within the DevOps teams, right? And how do you do that, right? How do you they're not born, they're made, and you have to, you got to grow them, right? Yeah. And cultivate it. And so I'm always looking at, where the security's happening in there, the static code analysis on mobile, perfect example, right? There's no reason that a security person has to do that, right? That could be done by the DevOps team now or the developer.
Yeah. And in many ways, it's a similar change in mindset to back when we had developers and operators, and we tried to create this term DevOps to bring them together. Even though you'll hear folks groan, I think it's valid to try and say the word DevSecOps. And the reason for that is not to, slap it on something that someone can buy. That's obviously not the way it's going to be, but it really is bringing that security into the fold as the security team needs to be part of the team that's delivering software, not some separate entity that's off running their own scans that no one understands, and you have to request it, and it's expensive to do. And like to your point, developers need to be security minded. And I think the only way to do that is to give them enough information to be that way, right? I think the traditional developer view, right? If we think of before DevOps, the traditional developer view of the operator is they don't ever want to change anything. They don't let me ship anything. They don't want me to, that's the department of no, right? And now the new department of no in many developers' minds is security. They don't want us to ship anything. They want to, they want to slow us down with security. But if you do shift left, right, bring that information to the developer, now they can be a partner in this, right? Because part of delivering better software is delivering more secure software. And so enabling your developers to have that information is so critical, right? I always tell the story of, I used to work for a government contractor, and we do, SAFE, right? Secure, the Scaled Agile framework. And we get to the end of what's called a program increment, right? It's like an 8-week sprint, if you can think of it that way. And at the very end, it would be like, okay, package the code up and send it to security. And it would come back with 195 bugs. And then we'd have this, kind of Sophie's choice of, do we ship this thing that the people need, right? It was a very critical customer. It was US SOCOM that I was working for, so Special Operations Command, right? Very critical customer. Do we ship this knowing there's issues, or do we go back to the drawing board and spend all this time fixing it? And a lot of those things were things that were added 8 weeks ago, and people have moved on, right? If we'd addressed each one of those 195 things as they came up, it would make it really easy to say, oh, this one's a false positive. Oh, this one, yeah, you're right. Let's fix that. Thanks for catching it, security. And so I think it's really critical. The only way to enable that partnership is to give everyone the same information, get them, working from the same sheet of paper and understanding.
Well, with context, right? Because, what a security guy looks at the paper, sees one thing, a developer looks at the paper and might see Chinese writing, right? I mean, So you got to have that context.
It's really critical.
Yep.
It's really critical.
Yeah. I love that you snuck Sophie's Choice in there, Brendan. Extra points for that.
All
right, no, that's good, man. I'll give you. We'll give that to you. We're going to give that to you. You own it. What else do we have in 13.5?
So another really cool thing that I'm really excited about, because I end up changing. I've got my laptop kind of set up here in my office, but then I like to go downstairs, or back when you could go work from a coffee shop. I love to do that. And so we've got this integration with Gitpod, and I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they're this basically online IDE and dev container group, so that you can actually click a button in GitLab to launch that repository in a Gitpod workspace, where you can already have a working development environment in a matter of seconds. So as a repository owner, I can set up the dev environment exactly how it's supposed to be in a container. And then as a consumer or someone that wants to come contribute to it, I click the button and I'm automatically brought into the Gitpod workspace, where I can edit the project. I can see the changes and how they're working in real time. So it's really exciting for me, because it kind of frees me from my development machine, and I can really code from anywhere.
Very cool. That's Gitpod, P-O-D, right? G-I-T-P-O-D.
G-I-T-P-O-D.io. Yeah,
excellent stuff.
And look for it in your GitLab interface, right? We'll just have a Gitpod button to.
Yeah, it's just a button right in there. So it's. I just want to make sure Gitpod is that an open source tool as well?
Yeah, so they have an open source version of their software, and then I think we're linking directly to the Gitpod.io, which is of course their then SaaS version, but it's built on open source, and it has an open source version as well.
Cool stuff. I never heard of that. It's good. I've learned something. All right. Hey, Brendan, we've got maybe 2-3 minutes left here. What else you got?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of cool features. So speaking of open source, we're really excited to finalize. We've been slowly working a number of features. We had 18 features that we announced a few months ago. We were moving to the open source version of GitLab from our paid versions. And with 13.5, we finalized moving feature flags and a number of features around them into our open source version. Yeah, so we're really excited about that. And I'm excited about that. That's something I love to use, again, when I'm tinkering, and now I don't need to pay GitLab to do that. So yeah, we've got feature flags. We've got flexible rollout strategies, where you can roll out by percentage or by user ID or at random, to kind of control. If you've got a feature flag to turn some new thing on, you can in a controlled way roll that out throughout your environments.
I think developers, DevOps people don't need convincing about just how powerful feature flags are in terms of helping put quality first into your deployments. But what strikes me is, whether we're talking to GitLab or any of the folks who have feature flag functionality or product lines, just the sheer number of feature flags that are being used in development today. It's in the billion, not to get Carl Sagan on us, but it's in the billions and billions.
It's a lot.
Right, on a regular basis. Sure. It's pretty incredible just how powerful and widespread the use of feature flags is today.
Yeah, we use it all the time. We use it all the time with GitLab, right? We're constantly deploying new GitLab versions, like if you look on GitLab.com already, it's the 13.6 release candidate, right? We're always ahead of ourselves on .com to test the software and make sure it's all working right before we release it to all our enterprises. And feature flags are critical. That's what enabled us to be able to even do that safely.
It's really real powerful. I remember when I first became familiar with them maybe 2 years ago, and wow, it's just really taken it by storm. All right, we got maybe time for one more. What do you got, Brendan?
Okay, another thing we're really excited about, again, talking about integrating better and better. You and I talked about recently our integrations with HashiCorp. Lots of integrations there. We also have a direct template for deploying directly using CloudFormation into EC2. So we've got a number of ways to deploy to AWS, like EKS and ECS. And so we're also excited to like leverage the CloudFormation API to allow you to deploy directly, put a build artifact in S3 and then deploy that content directly to an EC2 instance. So as much as we all love Kubernetes and containers and all that stuff, there's still plenty of software that's running just on, the first product AWS had, EC2. And so we're excited to make that easier for folks to deploy to in 13.5.
Excellent. And as usual, Brendan, people can get this information and more about 13.5 on GitLab.com as well as the blog. I think it's blog.gitlab.com, right?
Exactly. Yeah. All of our release posts come with a blog that has links to the documentation and the issue and the implementation of it.
Hey, man, thanks for coming on and doing the usual bang-up job on this. I appreciate it. Sounds like 13.5, the Alan Schimmel birthday release, follows in great footsteps and is another great GitLab release.
Yeah. We like to say it's the best release ever, every month.
Well, it's probably because it's my birthday release, but whatever. Hey, man, Brendan, we'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Alan.
All right. Brendan O'Leary, Senior Developer Evangelist at GitLab here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to be right back with our next guest. Bye-bye.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Sometimes you find out about these companies. To you, they were a best-kept secret, but to the rest of the world, they're actually pretty well known. One of these is Contentful. I just found out about Contentful in meeting Paolo Negri, their CTO co-founder. Contentful's been around for a number of years as a headless CMS. They decouple the content from the application, so it allows you to take the same content and parse it out or distribute it out in multiple channels, multiple applications, multiple functions. It gives a lot of flexibility, scalability to developers, DevOps, and other content providers. Talk to Paolo about that and really just, what an impact this is having and has been having in the marketplace. So here's my interview with Paolo Negri of Contentful.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. In this segment for TechStrong, I'm joined by Paolo Negri. And if I mispronounce, I apologize. But Paolo is the CTO founder of a company called Contentful. Paolo, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you, Alan, for having me. And the pronunciation was correct. So no worries about that.
Stop, cut.
Sorry.
Everything was fine. We started. We're losing his voice. Paolo, talk for me a little bit.
Can you hear this clearly? And is it working? No?
No. Samantha, are you hearing Paolo?
Yeah, I'm hearing both of you fine, and it's clear on my end.
I can't hear Samantha either. It must be us. Hold on a second, guys.
I can hear clearly Samantha and also Alan.
Microphone, AirPods. I'm losing sound, Paul.
You are?
Yeah. Guys, can anyone hear me?
I can.
Paolo hears me.
Yep.
I can as well. Yep.
Samantha's talking, but I can't hear anyone. I don't think it's the pods because it says the pods are on. Hey, guys, try talking again.
Can you hear me now, Alan? Alan, can you hear this?
Let's try this. What about now?
Alan, can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you. Okay. It's the AirPods. 1 second. For whatever reason, these AirPods went on and off. Give me a second. How about now, Paolo? Can you talk?
Yes, I can talk. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. Yeah, now I hear you. All right. That was a good practice run. And we'll do it again. All right, Paul, we're ready to rock and roll.
Okay, take 2. And we're in 3, 2.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another episode of TechStrong TV. For this episode, we're joined by Paolo Negri of Contentful. Paolo is the founder, CTO of Contentful. Paolo, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hello, Alan. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. So, Paolo, we've never interviewed anyone, I believe, from Contentful on TechStrong here at MediaOps. So I guess we should start with a little bit about, Contentful and what you guys do. And maybe we could hear a little bit. You're the co-founder. How did you come to co-found Contentful?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's an interesting story all related to technology. So Contentful is an API-first cloud-native content platform. It is a technological platform that allows you to manage content at scale. Again, being API first is a product that was with developers at the center of the action, and with the idea of continuous delivery of projects where content needs to be integrated in software that follows the continuous delivery principle of continuous software delivery. So that's what Contentful does. And from the point of view of how I came to be the founder of Contentful is very related to, again, the whole developer and technology story. I studied myself engineering back in Italy. That's where I am from. And I became very passionate about Linux, which made it so that my first job was in system administration and establishing a system of computers. And then I gradually migrated to a role that was more involved with software development, especially backend systems. And I grew my career in starting to lead technical teams that are working backend systems that also had a big part of infrastructure components. And I work in different businesses, advertisement, in classifieds, finally in online games. And just before Contentful, I was actually working in social games, writing backends that were serving millions of daily users who were playing online. And the foundation of Contentful comes at this point of my career. I was looking a bit for my next project to work on. And I met Sasha, who was working on this idea of a content management system for mobile applications. And when Sasha, my co-founder, talked to me about this idea, and I looked into it, I thought, well, that's a very strong idea because, again, I was working in social games and I worked in advertisement before. And in both businesses, there was really a big problem of integrating content in these products, whether they were in the advertisement platform or whether they were in the social game. Because all the products that were available for content management were products that relied on the fact that content will be presented as a page. And obviously, this is not the case for advertisement, and this is not the case for social games. The content is actually integrated in the software, and the content is shown and displayed in an interactive experience. So I started really getting involved with the idea and working with Sasha on this bigger principle that is really, how do you have a content management platform that allows you actually to integrate content in software, which is a completely different problem from how you present content on a page. Like, you need to be able. And this led us basically to imagining what Contentful will become and how we will build it. And then we had this idea of having the API, as a centerpiece of the architecture, because in order to integrate content with software, you need to have content available as a data structure that is fine-grained enough so that you can actually insert the content in the right point of the application and at the right level of detail. And yeah, this was the idea that we started developing, and was also something that ultimately convinced me in becoming a founder, because I wasn't looking for something that would be a business early on, but having a technical background myself, I thought becoming involved with a technology company that builds technology for technologists, essentially, can really be a way for me to get involved also on the product side of things, because I can know so much about how our customers will be working. I have experience in working in development teams. I have experience working with product. I have experience in developing digital products like games. And I can relate to a lot of the product aspect, and not only building the technology that supports a product, but building the technology and thinking also about the product itself from a product management and creative point of view. So that's the story of how this involvement came about, and how yeah, I became a founder and started working with Contentful. And yeah, so yeah, we
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No,
Yeah,
you go ahead.
We went pretty far. We started, we were a team of two around 8 years ago, and we are today a team of around 400 people. So obviously they did it off, and we could actually, bring our idea very much forward, and I'm pretty proud of what we are today.
That's a fantastic story. 8 years from 2 to 400 employees. Very successful. Congratulations. So, Paolo, couple of things. First of all, I didn't hear you use the term headless CMS. Excuse me, but yet, I think Contentful is sort of known as probably the leader in this so-called headless CMS.
Yeah, for sure. Headless CMS is something we've been associated to, especially starting in the early years of Contentful. People really needed a name for this new content management approach that was emergent at that point in time, and Contentful has really been one of the leaders of the discussion there. And the idea was really, again, all the other content management system had this hardwired component where managing content meant also creating a page. Okay, and right. Instead, Contentful embraces this idea that is like you manage content, and then the content becomes a data structure that again is emitted via the API, that is available via the API, so that you can connect to the content management component a range of different applications that can be mobile, can be web, can be eventually Internet of Things, and distribute content on all these different outlets in different shape and form, while keeping them together from a point of view of content management. Because of course, one important aspect of content management are the people who actually work on the content, and they need to be invited and participate to this process. It must be possible to create content for the authors and the people who operate the content to interact with the content, and you want ultimately the API as a mean of integrating then finally this content in the digital experience the content is integrated in.
Understood. And one of the nice things about sort of decoupling the content from the application, we could use the word container. I don't mean like a Docker container or something like that. Yeah. But the container from the content is that we could change the content on the back end, right? That feeds into that container so that you can update and dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It allows you very flexible from the point of view of keeping the content updated. And again, the application can be quite dynamic. And the fact that the presentation is not hardwired to the content structure allows you to update only the part that you actually want to touch without being concerned with the other. So you can update only the content without having to update the application or the layout, and vice versa. You can have a new layout based on content that is already there. And again, it allows you to decouple the problems and not having to deal always with the two parties whenever you touch something that was a bit the old school, the old way of doing things.
Agreed. Now, another thing you mentioned was this concept sort of continuous delivery of content, right? And to our DevOps audience, that, continuous delivery is a very known quantity, a known technology. The idea of taking that CD kind of
Sure.
paradigm, and making it for content, not just for code.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Not just for.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic. That again is an idea that matured with working on Contentful. Is really everything is becoming digital, so everything is becoming dependent from the software delivery pipeline. This is continuous process of delivery of the software. But again, if you think about digital experience, there is also the content part of it, and there are other components that go to it, and everything needs to be flowing together on the same delivery. And that's why we have more and more cross-functional teams. Like we see our customers have teams that they have on board developers, and they have on board content specialists, and they have someone who manages translations. And essentially, the idea of Contentful as a platform is really that is the place where the technical delivery, the content delivery, and all the orchestration that goes around this process can all be hooked up into in a fluent, agile process that makes everyone work consistently, and keeping the works specialized, because obviously what works with developers as an experience is quite different from what can work for authors or translators. And the Contentful really, works hard on developing all these aspects so that everyone who participated in building, running, and maintaining the digital experience can actually be hooked up into this flow of continuous delivery. And this also has a connection, obviously, with the whole concept of digital transformations and how you run a digital business. Like you need these tools where all these different skill sets and profiles can come together and contribute their part in a way that took them to the continuous delivery concept. So it is very much a way of extending the idea of agile and continuous delivery from software and the technology to the more broader, who are all the parties, who are all the participants to maintaining a digital product that need to be integrated.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is an easy question, because I think from everything you're saying, I know the answer. But with COVID, with everything going on, people working remotely, not in the offices, teams having to work, remote.
Sure.
Something like Contentful is not. It's not hard to do with a remote team. It's kind of almost designed to work. It's digital.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a platform that can, be used by remote work, and that's actually, how it was born, really, as a digital product. I mean, interestingly, also, Contentful originally was established in Berlin, but since day one, we sold our product globally, and customers from all over the world could use it because it's a cloud-based platform, so it's available in the same way wherever you can have a computer, so you can access the application. And again, I mean, the whole COVID phenomenon made everyone think a lot more about digital, like what they can render in a digital way that used to be available physically, and Contentful can really be a tool that can help with that. And that's again where this concept of continuous delivery, but also agile, being able to work quickly on a proof of concept and iterate on it is also a component that is important about Contentful. Not only is digital, but it's set up in a way where you can pretty quickly get to publishable stage of your idea and start getting it in the hands of customers. And we've really seen in the early stage of COVID that there has been a few customers that got in touch really to say, okay, we have a short-term project, we want to get something starting, and we are looking at a very time-bound delivery, and we could help them on saying, yes, you can have your cross-functional team all involved in the right way. Developers can use the content repository, authors can work in this way in the application, and all from their remote location, they can come together and get you to the version 0.1 beta of your application soon enough, so you can keep on talking with your customer and keeping the conversation going now that the physical channels are going through difficulty.
Good, absolutely. Excellent. Paolo, we didn't even tell people, what's the website?
Sure, it's contentful.com.
Easy enough. Easy enough.
Yeah.
And then how getting away from the technology a little bit, how is Contentful offered, sold, packaged? Right? Is it a SaaS type of thing,
it is a software as a service. That's how it was born. And there is a community tier, which is free for use, and is really for technologists that want to experience and prove this kind of technology for content management. And then there are paid tiers that you can just pay with the credit card. And for enterprises that have more sophisticated needs, there is an enterprise tier that can be discussed with our team in order to understand what's the right setup and what's the right formula. But it's something that literally everyone listening to this interview can try out right now. If you're curious, all the documentation is obviously public, and there are many easy ways to start working with Contentful. And actually, we also had an initiative related to COVID. We have a special plan that is free for anyone who's developing something that helps in dealing with the emergency.
Fantastic. Paolo, first of all, it's one founder to another. What a great story with Contentful, to grow it like this and to see it really become a leader in its space. But also, I mean, it's a product, I think, that just makes so much sense when we, especially as I said, with our DevOps, cloud native audience, the idea of decoupling the content from the application and making that a dynamic link via API and stuff. It's just, I'm surprised someone didn't think of it before, frankly. But you know what? That's their loss in your game. What a great thing. Best of luck with Contentful, and thank you for joining us here on TechStrong TV.
Thank you very much, Alan. It's been a pleasure to talk.
Okay. Paolo Negri, co-founder, CTO at Contentful here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right. Next up, we have our interview with Fletcher Heisler of Veracode. Of course, Veracode's annual security report is a staple in the cyber world. Fletcher's going to give us a preview, some highlights of that, as well as talking about the importance of training and education on security for developers. Right? That's where the focus is on DevSecOps now. Making sure developers, DevOps folks are able to help make their code more secure, better quality. So here's my interview with Fletcher Heisler.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. In this segment, our guest is Fletcher Heisler. Fletcher's with Veracode. And Fletcher, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Fletcher, our audience knows Veracode. We've been covering Veracode here for as long as I've run this business, both from the security point of view, where I've interacted with Veracode. I think from the day a lot of your founders left At Stake when Symantec bought At Stake and Veracode popped up shortly thereafter. So I've known Veracode forever. And then, of course, I started DevOps.com and DevSecOps became a thing. And security for developers, obviously Veracode's played a big role in that. So, but what about you? What's your role with Veracode? What a little bit about your background?
Sure thing. So I am the Director of Developer Enablement at Veracode. And I think that's one of the trends we're seeing in general, is that security is not just becoming more in line, but is being driven by developers, and they have a bigger and bigger stake in the game there. So helping to encourage, enable, empower developers, give them a voice in security, and make sure that they have the right knowledge to be writing secure code.
I think that's, it's funny. I think they've always had a big stake in security. They just didn't know it. But that was part of the issue. I think now they are becoming aware of it. But let's talk specifically. The way I see it going down, Fletcher, is there are some companies that are saying, hey, the developers are really important here. We need to make our security tools developer-centric. We need to make our tools developer-friendly, user-friendly.
Absolutely. I think that's part of the trend for sure, is go where developers are. So a lot of integrations, we're doing scans through APIs. Even our training is very much focused on the skills and the tools that developers are already using. You have to put that all in context, not give them extra hurdles, extra new processes, but really make what they're doing easier to make it more secure.
Yeah, I think that's another aspect is the training aspect, right? Helping developers understand that a lot of these exceptions, security rules, governance, compliance issues aren't done just sort of arbitrarily or capriciously, but there's actually somewhere there's a reason for it, right? There's a good reason for it. And I think training to help developers understand where these come from and why, this is a preferred way of doing it and this isn't, is an important part of that. So let's talk a little bit about training, because it's a lot of what your role revolves around in Veracode, right? Is getting developing this training for developers.
Yeah, so mainly I'm in charge of security labs. Veracode Security Labs is our sort of latest offering when it comes to training developers in writing secure code and giving them that kind of practical knowledge and that hands-on keyboard training. I'm a developer by training myself, and I like to say that I learned how to write code by writing code. I didn't just hear someone talk about it or read it in a book. You actually have to get that hands-on keyboard training. So what we're doing with the labs is giving actual vulnerable applications to developers, letting them hack them, see that exploit in full context, and then patch them back up and actually practice writing secure code to get that muscle memory and to get that understanding of why that matters. We actually just, we released our SOS, our annual State of Software Security, with a lot of interesting findings in there, but no surprise, the vast majority of apps have security flaws. And a lot of those flaws are the old standards, our SQL injection, our cross-site scripting. And I think what we're seeing is the old training isn't working. We've had a decade or two to hammer in those points around parameterize your queries. You can only say that so many times, but if you actually give a developer an app that looks like what they write in context and say, here's what can go wrong, here's why that matters, and here are the right tools for you to do your job well, it sticks a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, so look, I've been in the security industry for 20 years. And if you would have told me in 2005, 2003, that I'd be sitting here with you in 2020, going on 21, and that you just finished, Vericode's, I forget what year it is, annual state of security of apps and security, and that, a majority of apps still have cross-site scripting, SQL errors. You don't see buffer overflows as much, I think, right?
Not as much. The higher level languages have helped out with that. But
yeah,
actually, one of our findings was the flaws depend on the language and the framework. So in PHP, you're going to see a lot more cross-site scripting because it's easier to make those kinds of mistakes. So it's also important to get the right training for the right tools.
And what languages you're using, right? But part of the issue there is, you go to today's enterprises and you do a survey. Well, how many different languages are you developing in, right? And between acquisitions and mergers and different fiefdoms within an enterprise, and it's not unusual to have 7, 8, or more different languages at play there. So when you're a developer, they're looking for multi-language developers, right? Who can develop across, several languages, and that probably lends itself to mistakes, right? Because people aren't as familiar, let's say, with some of these languages and some of the pitfalls or best practices to avoid common security problems. And it happens.
It's interesting. I mean, if you look at JavaScript, it's technically one language, but endless versions, endless frameworks on top of it. And a lot of them do lots of useful things for you. But as an example, React does a pretty good job of preventing things like cross-site scripting, but it still happens. So we even recently came out with a set of labs on common React pitfalls to say, when you are that development team throwing up that new application with a new framework, it does most of the work for you, which is great, but here are the traps you can still fall into.
Sure. So Fletcher, let's talk a little bit about these labs. Are they formal training classes where you got to log on from 10 to 2 and it's instructor led? Are they do them at your own pace whenever you have a moment to work it on? Combination of it? What, individual, group?
The labs themselves are pretty bite-sized and on demand. They are 10 to 15 minute exercises generally. The sort of thing that you could pick up between tasks or between meetings. Maybe even if you saw coming out of a scan result, there's a particular issue, get a little extra refresher on that particular topic, that instance of that vulnerability in that language or framework in a very bite-sized piece. I think that's part of what we've seen as the inherent flaw with older training approaches, is to say, here's your 2 days of security training a year, and we're going to talk about SQL injection for 2 hours right now. And maybe that will hammer it home. That's not really how people learn. Plus, technology is changing. We can't do that and then roll out React and be ready in any way. So being able to say bite-sized, very tactically, here are the sorts of things you need to know right now.
Yeah, I no doubt about it. Let's go back to the survey, if you don't mind, a little bit. So we mentioned that we're still seeing a lot of, garden variety type of defects, which, probably account for 80% or more of the incidents that we see too, right? Are, they're not novel. They're taking advantage of these garden variety defects. What were some of the other key findings there, Fletcher?
Well, I think the finding around specific languages tying to specific vulnerabilities is really key. We also found that API-based scanning is definitely helping and a growing trend. So again, going to use the right tools, automate as much as possible. Don't create extra workflow. Just get something that's already in that pipeline that's already running. Can be a really helpful way to make sure that you're ahead of the game. That's, I think, another thing that we found overall, unfortunately, is developers just aren't keeping up. The flaws are compounding and adding, and that backlog isn't always going down. So that's partly on leadership to say, let's prioritize this. Let's make sure that developers are empowered, that they have the time, they have the clearly allocated responsibility to make progress on that tech debt. But I think it's also to the point of the cost of reducing flaws once they're in production versus trying to get earlier and earlier in that cycle. With more training, hopefully the best flaw is one that was never introduced. So being able to nip it in the bud as quickly as possible and not have to do a lot of expensive cleanup work afterward.
Got it. I agree with you. So I guess my next kind of area I wanted to touch on with you, Fletcher, was, so we get this security, right? Within the security community, the Veracode annual report is a known commodity, right? Everyone should take a read at it. They usually do a good job. How do you get developers' mind share of the report? Like, hey man, there's stuff in here that's really important for you, right? This is really done for your benefit. How do you get them, buying into it?
Yeah, I think, primary audience is security management. They're the ones who can most easily help drive those decisions and organization level policy changes. But there are a lot of really useful points in there at the individual developer level as well. So being able to say, I'm working in this language, in this framework, here are the sorts of things I should be aware of, or even here are the types of scans we might consider running on this application to make sure that we're ahead of the curve there and we're not missing anything along the way. It can be really helpful for sure. One of the things we actually recently introduced is a community edition of our labs. So security labs for individual developers. It's a limited subset of content. It doesn't have any of the team reporting capabilities or things like that, but it's a free resource that any engineer who wants to learn a bit more about, say, React, can jump into a few labs, get some experience, get some hands-on coding, seeing that in context as well. So I think you'll probably be seeing more of that from Veracode, developer-focused resources over time to make sure that we're empowering from the ground up as well.
Sounds pretty cool. And it's as an observer in the market, it's interesting to see Veracode's continuing evolution to becoming a developer-friendly security organization from a security, so from a pure security organization. And I think it closely parallels it, the whole DevSecOps movement with that. So that's great. There is a school of thought, though, within talking now on behalf of security people. Have we gone too far to the developer side, and are we ignoring our security execs, our security pros, who, they want the help of developers, they welcome this, but ultimately it's their heads on the line, right? Their necks are on the line here. And do you worry about that, right? That we've gone too developer friendly and kind of are forgetting who our friends are there.
I think it's less about being developer friendly and more about empowering your developers to be able to work on the same team. Security is somewhat compliance driven just by its nature. And I think that's a lot of what a security team manages. You shouldn't be relying on your developers at the level of making sure that you are SOC 2 compliant or PCI compliant or things like that. They can certainly help out, but the audits, the risk management pieces, these are all very much in the wheelhouse of security and security management. That said, if you're trying to secure your code, there's no way a security team of a modern organization will be able to keep up with that by themselves. So it's really about bringing in those resources, making sure that the engineers writing the code have that knowledge, have that capacity, and that capability to help out in that respect. You can't do all of that on the security side, plus help triage flaws and write fixes and know the innards of every last JavaScript framework coming out every month. That's more than a full-time job in itself.
Absolutely. Fletcher, two last things, just kind of housekeeping kind of stuff. Number one, for developers, DevOps folks out here who might be interested in the labs, where can they get more information?
Sure. the easiest. I don't know if there might be a way for us to provide a URL attached, but
we will put it in the notes, but it's hard to do on video. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. If you just look for Veracode Security Labs, likewise, if you're an individual developer just looking to get started, specifically look for that community edition. But it's very easy for us to spin up an account and let you poke around and see some labs firsthand.
Excellent. And for people who want to get a hold of the latest version of the report, it's out yet already? It's already out, I mean?
You can just go, I'm sure, to veracode.com, and it will be up there on the front page somewhere.
It always is. It always is. Hey, Fletcher, say hello to Chris Weisball, Chris Ang, the rest of our friends at Veracode. Thanks so much for joining us here on TechStrong TV today.
Will do. Thanks so much, Al. All
righty. Fletcher Heisler, Veracode. Veracode Security Labs, both the Enterprise and Community Edition, as well as this year's version of the Veracode Security Reports out there. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest. Good stuff there with our friends at Veracode. Next up, as I mentioned, we're going to go, it's not that old, but we're going to go into the archives from our most recent DevOps experience. And I have a great presentation by Akash Dayal and Bob Vuong of Deloitte's Cloud. And these are people running the Deloitte Cloud teams. And this is scaling DevOps across the enterprise. It's a great presentation. I think you'll have a lot to learn from it. Here it is.
Hi, everyone. This is Akash Dayal, and I'm here with Bob Vuong, one of my colleagues, to discuss our experiences around how do you scale DevOps across the enterprise. We're very excited to have this discussion with you and share some of our experiences and learnings from this. Very quickly, we're going to spend some time going through, how we define DevOps to begin with, because as you know, there's slightly different variations and definitions of it. And then we wanted to describe to you, what is the kind of our clients generally taking and the challenges they see in that journey. And then, spend majority of our time towards describing, based on our experience, how do you actually scale that adoption? How do you drive that adoption, measure the success, some of the ingredients for the success, and what are the kind of gaps we're seeing in the industry, and closing out with a quick case study of a successful experience. With that, let me just give you a quick background of us and our team here. So this is Akash Dayal. I'm a principal, and I lead our cloud strategy practice across the US. As part of the cloud strategy practice, we essentially help clients get started on their cloud journey all the way to executing, and then situations where they find issues or they get stalled in their cloud journeys, help them reset and evolve into a scaled model for adopting cloud. And my colleague Bob is here with me. Bob, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Akash. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Vuong, and I'm a principal partner of and part of Deloitte's cloud practice. I also co-chair the DevOps practice, and where a lot of synergies between what Akash and I do is where implementation meets strategy. So where Akash generally helps clients think of the overall strategy for DevOps adoption. I'm more into the implementation and operations space, where we actually get hands on keyboard as well as sustain that environment over time. Akash, back to you.
Great, thank you. And just for your reference, the size and scale of our team here, Deloitte, as you may already know, is the largest professional services firm globally, almost 300,000 people. We have published a lot of eminence pieces around this topic area, as well as broader large-scale organizational transformations. We have a lot of wide variety of tools and accelerators we bring to bear. We'll give you a quick view of that today as well. And then it's a globally integrated capability, because what we really see is that you're doing cloud not for the sake of cloud. You're doing DevOps not for the sake of DevOps. These are cool words, but what you're really trying to do is you're trying to drive towards business outcomes. You're trying to change the view of IT from being a cost center to a value driver to your business. And that's how we bring all our offerings in an integrated way together to help our clients drive that success. So with that, let me switch to our topic at hand. So first of all, what is DevOps? So if you move to the next page, so the way we think about DevOps, it's truly a transformed software delivery approach. And what we are looking forward to is essentially using DevOps to deliver an experience, to deliver a method that helps you be delivering better value sooner, safer, happier. So let me tell you what that means. So better quality software, better quality applications, right? Delivered in faster pace, sooner, right? Flow efficiency is greater, in a safer manner, to make sure security, compliance, and all of those things are baked in, and it's not breaking, but it's sustainable. And in all this, the value delivered is not just from a business value standpoint, but the process of delivering is also happier. So both for your developers, your employees, your colleagues, as well as more importantly, your customers. So you're delivering better value sooner, safer, happier. That's how we, in a nutshell, define what a DevOps means. Is that there are two parts that come together to deliver this, the dev part and the ops part. And that's where that infinity sign at the bottom is. And we'll cover that in a lot more detail during this session. But the idea here is to take those steps of the journey and make them seamless so that developers and technology folks can focus on driving real business value rather than getting stuck in the processes. So that's how we think about DevOps. And then if you move to the next page, why DevOps, right? Why is it important today? So in a nutshell, our research and experience has clearly indicated that, people who do this well, organizations that do this well, can drive as much as 46 times more code deployments into the production than the people who don't do this, right? So, 46 times, that's immense. And that too at a 7 times lower change failure rate. That's just powerful. And that's why we think that DevOps is the journey that a lot of organizations are already taking and are being successful at. And the key part here is, today, 30% of the IT budgets are allocated towards, 30% or under of that towards business innovation. And we need to change that, because a lot of that time and effort should be spent in building new business capabilities and deploying it so that IT can help business drive differentiation and outcomes, and less about just running the IT. And the changing landscape is really driving that. The speed of technology innovation, especially with COVID, the whole acceleration of digital transformation, virtual collaboration that has come with it, all these things, and automated processes, right? But automated processes, not just the sake for automation, but to drive efficient handoffs and seamless visibility across everything that the developers are doing for the business, is where we see DevOps really being very, very powerful. So that's what we mean by, DevOps and why you should go through that journey. So let me pivot a bit and describe to you how we see the current journey that organizations are taking and some of the challenges, and how we think about eliminating and solving for those challenges. So number one, if I'm a CIO, what am I worried about? What are the things that are top of mind for me? So those are things like, enhanced security, compliance, and governance. I want to make sure whatever I do, whether on-prem or cloud, is done in a way that it's secure, it's compliant, it's well-governed, right? Two, it's done at an affordable cost to my business. If IT is taking off significant points of the margin base, that's not good for any one of us. So we want to make sure IT is doing it in the most efficient, cost-reduced way possible. At speed, to make sure that we're delivering things that are faster. We have seen this example where an investment bank set up a retail bank and basically took over deposits from a lot of different banks as market share. We saw a car manufacturing company start building ventilators, and ramp that up faster than even the manufacturing companies that could do it. So this is where agility and really driving business disruption would help from an IT standpoint. And then obviously all that delivered through an enterprise platform that enables your developers to focus on delivering business capabilities to your business in high quality, faster way. So those are kind of things we typically see as CIOs that they want to achieve. And today's answer to those capabilities is a lot of different tools. As you see on this page, I'm not going to name any one of them, but you can imagine that if you take this 8-step process and just take any one step of it, let's say coding, right? The source code management, the integration, the build, the database management. I mean, the tool choices are immense in this space. And what happens in this is, every business unit, every developer has a very religious preference around these. So what, as a CIO or IT executive, you land up with is a lot of stitching around all these tool sets to come together and deliver a single pipeline for your, application. And, while that is great, but the amount of effort that is required operationally and engineering-wise to deliver that is immense. And it doesn't help that the number of tool choices is only expanding exponentially. So we see a lot of the challenge around just stitching this together and making it sound like it's done for an enterprise, not just for one application team. So that's, I think, number one challenge we see. The other part of it is what you see in this infinity diagram is just the 8 steps. There's a lot more to this from a software development and delivery lifecycle management standpoint. So Bob, if you go to the next page, what we'll see there is there's a lot of other things, continuous testing, security, progress reporting, application monitoring, all of those things. And what it does is it takes the useful energy of the developer towards managing a lot of different things which are not directly related to developing new code. It takes all that energy and it focuses towards and starts driving bandwidth issues, constraints. Security and compliance is a lot more reactive than proactive on this. There is no visibility as to where I stand in that pipeline process, exactly what issues are blocking it, and who owns those issues. And those are some of the really complicated challenges we see our clients facing today, which drive some of this, challenges. So in a nutshell, if I just have to wrap up the challenges side, if you go to the next page, both from a business as well as an IT standpoint, there's a lot of things that we can do better, right? And in the end, the single most goal is, can we spend less time on this toil and more time reducing the cycles and the cost it takes to release software and make it faster, cheaper, better? As we said, better value, sooner, safer, happier, right? So in order to do that, some of these challenges need to be addressed directly, whether it's about, the timelines, whether it's about functional or operational, regulatory, or from the standpoint of, resources and skill sets. How do we create that agility within the organization with the right skills to deliver this? And what we're trying to get to is DevOps is not just a technology journey. Technology is only one component of it. It's truly a mindset shift. And that's what I want to emphasize on, because, can we engineering-wise build and stitch together all these tools to build a pipeline? Absolutely we can. But can we scale that? Probably not. Because if we do that bespoke for every single business unit, for every single application, we cannot really scale it at an enterprise level. And that's what we have seen our clients challenge with. So with that, let's just look at how do we actually solve these issues? How do we think about our process for delivering that? So we're going to go into a lot more detail, but let me start with, what are some of those basic enablement activities? So if you are starting from scratch, CIOs can really influence the business leaders on how exactly to move technology forward and drive this adoption. So what that looks like, number one, creating that alignment and focus. How do you do that? Well, let's describe what is that future developer experience going to look like? What is the operating model that will deliver that, right? So get into the launch side of it. Start thinking about taking a group of applications, doing some portfolio analysis and saying which applications are going through the largest number of changes, which applications are truly business critical, which applications we want to pilot through this, because that's where you're going to see the momentum shifting, build up to say that I've described my DevOps operating model, but let me apply it to the most hairiest problems I have, to the applications that go through the most changes, and start showing that progress. And in that process, bring my organization along. The DevOps org, the workforce redesign, the skills around it, upskilling them. That will help you not only test and prove and pilot the model, but truly start thinking about improving your capacity. You don't want to be doing it at a 2 teams, 3 teams, 4 teams level. You want to be doing it at an enterprise level. And that's the idea behind that. And then from there is where you can start scaling this to an enterprise adoption and then operating through that. So now I've described the enablement activities, but this is where I see organizations, they generally start at the transform or the pilot phase level and not really have some of the initial steps taken on. And what happens in that process is few things. One, you do a great job of building a pipeline, but it stops at the dev environment. So you do a great fast release to dev environment, but to get to production, you need all your approvals, compliance, security, all of those. And hence, while you can say that you have a pipeline, it's not going all the way to production, which means you are actually solving one part of the problem, but not really changing the way and the pace at which you are deploying applications and changes in production. The second part of the problem is you look at it from an individual business unit lens. So every business unit with every developer may have their own preference of tools and how you stitch the solution together, essentially making it 5 DevOps journeys rather than 1. And again, neither one of them will help you scale. So what we have come up with is a way to think about it a bit more bottom up, to think about it a bit more, how do we engineer a solution that can drive that mindset shift, not just the technology, but the true mindset shift and deliver that. And I'll invite my colleague Bob to start describing some of those operational elements that we have done for our other clients that have actually shown success. So Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Akash. So as Akash describes a lot of our clients are actually embracing this journey already. They've taken on at least developing the strategy for what DevOps looks like for the organization and starting to implement certain aspects of what they consider DevOps and trying to proliferate that through all parts of the organization. Some are successful in developing a CI/CD pipeline. Some are successful even course correcting what they've done with parts of that pipeline. But I think what we're seeing now is that embarking on this journey is much more difficult than anticipated. Getting all parts of the firm to buy in or parts of the organization to buy into the actual change requires not only the top-down approach that Akash talks about, but also really a bottom-up approach, really enabling each of these teams to understand what it means to develop code faster, to be part of the business, and to entwine IT into all parts of what they're doing. So as we talk about overall DevOps journey, it's critically important to understand what is the role that the working group or the product teams play in this journey. There's, as the overall environment is changing, people are starting to see that there are critical steps that need to take along this journey. I see a lot of my clients now embark on this project, the product team conversion, trying to figure out what the mesh of the development team, operational teams look like, how to implement security in there and so forth. And so for us, it's about the people, process, and technology change, and how do you make that part of an entire cultural change? And our perspective is really, there needs to be 4 major pivots to this. And the 4 major pivots are what we call the pace of the journey. So in that, we actually look at the processes, the architecture, the culture, and the engineering changes that have to occur. And all this, when it's bundled together, have 4 major benefits to the organization. Number 1, it increases agility. So agility of the organization, the teams go up. Number 2, it helps to drive business forward and drive the business value forward. At the same time, we're hoping to reduce toil, the toil that creates conflict and slow things down between teams and the product development cycle. And most importantly of all, it helps to shift left responsibility and build. So you're looking more at how do you put code defects detection in ahead of the process? How do you build in operational requirements ahead of the process? And we believe that if you take these 4 pivots holistically, the process, the architecture, culture, and engineering pivots, and look at them holistically, that the organization can indeed embark on this overall journey. So let's dive in a little bit into what these 4 pivots look like. Akash early on talked about that we've seen a lot of organizations do the CI part of this very well, but the CD part is kind of where it suffers, right? The change from test to production is difficult because it's so manual. The implementation of infrastructure can be difficult because some of this architecture still lives on-prem and so forth. And so how do you get away from that space? And how do you actually start to allow the coder and the developer and your development teams to be greatly empowered? And one of them is understanding the existing processes that live there today and actually developing new processes, right? And I know that this is pretty common when you talk about DevOps in general, but I don't think we emphasize enough on how difficult it is to break down some of these barriers. One of the key ways that we talk about implementing these changes is looking at the overall organization. One of the great things that Kosh brings his clients forward with is look at the organizational change that has to occur and what does the new org model look like. So if you create a new org model and understand that product teams are essential to operate together, and that new operating model helps to drive new processes, then your developers can in fact have complete control over the deployment process, right? So then CD becomes a critical part of this entire process. And then we also want to, at the same time, start to get more maturity into some of the lighthouse projects and teams that are already part of this journey. So what we're seeing is that there's a focus on SRE teams and focus on higher performance engineering teams and so forth. And with that, it's a complex adoption of new KPIs. And so SLIs, SLOs, and SLAs become a major part of the discussion. But in essence, a lot of my clients tend to adopt old KPIs. And so what's extremely important is for us to focus on, again, what we talked about earlier, which is the BVSSH framework, better, value, sooner, safer, happier, and start to focus on a few of those metrics, right? We talked about happier, and so Net Promoter Score becomes a critical component to that. Understanding what actually gets the clients to come back, what actually gets them to talk about your product and voice their happiness and overall reference of that product to other clients, right? And so we want to make sure that we start to leverage KPIs minimally, just to understand how do you improve parts of the overall adoption. And I would say one more thing about the KPIs is that we generally look at KPIs in 3 different forms, and I try to lead my clients this way too. There is the transformation KPIs, what's happening as part of the product teams are transforming. There's the business-led ones, and we want to make sure that that's important because we want to pull the business along for the ride. And then finally, more important, I think, is the overall adoption metrics. Are teams actually adopting this fast enough? How much of the organization is this proliferating across? And I don't think my clients pay enough attention to those type of KPIs to understand how the overall organization is being affected. The next pivot that we generally take is the architecture pivot. And this is slightly different from how we would generally think of architecture, because I think a lot of people think of architecture as the infrastructure behind it. But we're really thinking about what does the new application architecture look like? And this becomes a responsibility of everyone. No longer is it just a software development team. And it becomes a core responsibility of every team member involved in this process. So you have a DevOps pod or a product team. Now you may have traditional people that are focused on operational services or security services, but they have to actually be very much ingrained in how the application architecture is changing. And you see trends in the industry now with containerization, microservices, and so forth. But there's also critical factors on how that is adopted, obviously, right? If things are moving towards the cloud, containerization may make a lot of sense, because as that migration occurs and as that product team is starting to shift that application towards this new architecture, there are natural fits into which type of architecture you're going to leverage. The culture pivot, I think, is probably one of the most difficult ones my clients see. And I generally lean towards making minimum viable changes to the culture rather than trying to have big bang approaches. Sure, we would all love to live in a truly flexible, truly agile organization, but there's legacy processes in place. There are legacy silos of parts of the organization. There's people who manage different work streams. And so those things have to come together into a overall culture change. And the minimum viable changes is kind of how we think of it, right? Pick one team, figure out what works well with that one team, then proliferate that out. So it makes smaller changes into how the teams are being measured, make smaller changes into how individuals and coders and developers are being measured, make sure that proliferates upwards, make sure that the leadership is involved with it. So, even though it may seem daunting to take these smaller changes, but we see that is that the overall adoption occurs with greater buy-in when you have smaller minimum viable changes. But there's no right way to do this. We hear a lot about the fail fast mentality, but I also have clients that don't want to fail fast; they rather learn fast. And so there's no right way to do this. The answer is really to figure out what works well for your organization. Start small, figure out what's well with the organization, and then kind of allow that adoption to breed greater adoption. And the last pivot that we take is really the engineering pivot, where we start to look at how do you start to manage everything as code? And now architects and software developers and everyone are taking a hands-on keyboard approach, right? So we're no longer having an architect create the application architecture on one side and then throw it over the fence for an engineering team, a software developing team to start coding, and throw it over the fence for operational team to manage, right? It's really, everyone has a key role, not only the operational aspects and the development aspects of this, but they're actually hands-on keyboard. The architects are no longer sitting on an ivory tower looking down and saying, hey, this is what their architecture standards look like, make sure you code to them. But it's making sure we break down the silos, not only between the different teams, but through all parts of the organization. So what does it look like? Akash really took the enablement activities and walked you through how we generally take the top-down approach from a client, but also there's the engineering activities, what actually happens on the ground through the workforce. And there are a few ways that we look at this, right? First, we like to sit down and do some ideation with the group. Look at the lighthouse projects, look at lighthouse accounts and teams that have been very successful or don't mind being the front runners of adoption and change. Figure out what agility looks like for them and how do you actually reimagine that across the enterprise. Now, again, it may not happen across the enterprise, but it needs to happen somewhere. And we pick lighthouse accounts because they're the ones that generally have a buy-in from the organization, have some of the thought leadership as well, and have team members that have partially either embarked or have partially adopted a lot of this philosophy and change. And then we look at different ways to leverage the platform to help drive this forward. As much automation as we can build within the platform, as much automation that we can build within the pilot programs helps with the transformation later on. And as part of that adoption or part of that pilot, we onboard DevOps teams. The team enablement is it's a critical part of this, right? And so as part of that culture change, we look for things such as building up guilds, doing hackathons, supporting the overall organization with what does team adoption look like, and what does education and training look like, an upskill in the workforce look like as well. You will also find that as part of this, there is a necessity for overall education and institutionalizing, what the practices are for DevOps. What we've seen is that coders can code very well, but they don't know how to operate an environment, and vice versa. People that are in the operational space that do service desk support may not have a great appreciation for scripting or coding or so forth. And so there needs to be a platform for education, for training, and understanding what maybe DevOps or even cloud native development and modernization look like. And eventually, we want to get to the nirvana of everything being almost self-service, right? The platform itself being self-service, aspects of code, and so forth. So we talked through our perspective, both from the top down and the bottom up, and how do we actually support organizations throughout the entire journey, from developing an overall DevOps strategy to implementation to actual, full DevOps/SRE mode. And this is an example of a recent client that Akash and I have both worked at over the past 1.5 years, where we've actually taken that overall approach with the organization, and they've been extremely successful in adopting not only cloud, but also DevOps throughout this entire process. So it really started off with our leadership team going in there and helping to develop the overall vision and strategy for what adoption looks like, standing up a cloud business office, helping to manage that transformation across the board. And then our teams actually implementing SRE teams across different parts of their business units. And then allowing that to proliferate outwards. We're at a point right now where we've matured the SRE thinking into what the client likes to call customer reliability engineering. And we're doing, weekly discussions with them, weekly guild discussions, weekly hackathons, and having different teams take on that responsibility. We've educated and trained over 1,000 people in that organization so far. And it's been a huge, massive shift from a year and a half ago where we started at basically zero to over a handful of people to about 1,000 people. So it's been quite successful for us. And so the real last thing that we'd like to talk about is we do have a perspective as to how to make this, how to effectively do this quickly and how to get things going in place. We talked about the holistic approach with PACE, but a lot of times our clients do ask, how do I jumpstart this? How do I make this really tangible for my developers and so forth? And so we've taken an approach of developing a platform which we call the DevOps Cloud Platform, DCP. It has over 50 integrated tools, 600 APIs. We've added our own best practices from the enterprise clients that we supported and across what we've seen in industry. But I think what's really important about this is understanding that even with something like DCP, it's only a stepping stone, right? Tools are tangible. You could actually see them being implemented, and clients generally gravitate towards tool adoption because it's measurable. It's something that you could put down and your developers can start using right away. But even DCP, suffers from the fact that it can't help push culture change forward, and it can't help the organization change all of the existing processes. So this is just one of our tools. I think it's extremely important for us to understand that in order for an organization to go part of this adoption, you take the entire PACE approach, pick several components of it, and then hopefully you leverage tools like a DevOps Cloud Platform to help with the overall journey. But the journey is much more comprehensive than this. So with that, I think I don't have anything else. Akash, if you don't, I think we should take some questions.
Yeah, all good. Thank you, folks, for your time. Hopefully you found this useful. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Bob or me.
Many thanks to the folks at Deloitte for allowing Akash and Bob to present a DevOps experience. Next up, we're going to go over to our Chief Content Officer Managing Editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has the news headlines from around our Media Ops community sites today. She also has a great preview of this week's webinars. And she has two good interviews. One is with Vasant Balasubramanian, and one is with Isa, CEO of Ubik Security. Tough names. But even though I butchered them, Charlene has them right. Let's go now to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 3rd edition of TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, encouraging everybody to get out and vote. But before you do that, please stick around because I'm just about to lay it on you with the day's headlines. Starting off on DevOps.com, we have an article that takes a look at DevSecOps in the financial services space. We've been talking about the financial services sector for a while. It's been getting a lot of attention of late as more consumers are adopting online banking amid the pandemic. And of course, being able to make deposits and conduct other transactions online has been around for a long time. But with everyone staying at home and bank branches shutting down to help stop the spread of COVID-19, mobile apps have become a lot more popular and necessary to enable users to do their banking and manage their finances. With so many people using mobile apps, it's even more critical that the apps are as secure as possible. So this article takes a look at 3 ways in particular that DevOps and security teams can work together to ensure fintech apps are secure now and moving forward. We also have an article that debunks some of the misconceptions about managing teams during the pandemic. Obviously, with the pandemic raging and most employees working from home full-time, managers don't have the ability to walk the halls and gauge the productivity levels of their employees, which some might say is a good thing. But that has given rise to certain concerns over the performance and success of the engineering team, whose work arguably has become even more important during the pandemic, as more users rely on applications to conduct their business and basically get through their day. This article takes a look at some of the misconceptions and invalid suppositions around engineering teams during COVID-19 regarding their productivity levels. They're high. Communication, that's great. And visibility into their work. That's a bit of an issue. But metrics derived from data collected from the right tools can help managers and business leaders understand how their teams are working and whether they're being as effective as they could be. It's an article worth checking out if your organization is questioning the productivity and efficiency of your developers and engineering teams. In news, Cisco Systems had its annual partner summit last week, virtually, of course. During his keynote, CEO Chuck Robbins said Cisco is working to make it possible for developers to not only provision IT infrastructure, but also impact how services are delivered using the application networking services the company is currently developing. This is big, especially for Cisco, and it gives rise to the notion that networking and storage operations will be assimilated into DevOps processes. Just like telecom and IT merged into one networking infrastructure in the early 2000s, now networking and app development are heading down the same path as more networks become software-defined and API-driven. It also signals a possible future in which the developers will be in charge of compute, storage, and networking as code across the enterprise. And those are some big shoes to fill. Over on Container Journal, ahead of KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con 2020 North America later this month, we have an article that looks at the issues surrounding Kubernetes development and how an extensible Kubernetes IDE could benefit developers, operators, and technology solution providers in the CNCF ecosystem. One dashboard to rule them all, as it were, could help solve a number of different problems and create a developer experience that promotes speed. A strong Kubernetes dashboard can, in principle, become a full-fledged Kubernetes IDE by creating some relatively simple integration glue. Code that lets contributors build extensions in a simple, secure, standardized way, the article notes. It's an interesting look at the concept, and the article is definitely worth checking out. On Security Boulevard, Sue Peremba takes a look at the growing concern over insider theft in the financial services sector during the COVID-19 lockdown. Looking at some of the findings from the 2020 NetRICS Cyber Threats Report, the article discusses the various threats organizations are increasingly worried about with their employees, especially during work from home. One statistic from the report, 70% of organizations are prioritizing deliberate data theft as a cybersecurity issue this year, which is more than double from last year's pre-pandemic 30%. This article takes a look at not only some of the threats posed by insiders in financial services, but also some ways organizations can protect themselves. And we have an interesting look at the rise of behavioral biometrics as an alternative to identity in identity and access management. Passwords are increasingly becoming passé, and many of the traditional two-factor authentication methods don't provide a high-quality user experience. Biometrics is a growing trend, but it's not perfect either. Behavioral biometrics, however, could be the next best thing in authentication. Everyone brings their own uniqueness to everything they do, from the way they swing a tennis racket to the way they hold their smartphone, based on their personal styles and preferences, speed, pressure, dexterity, and so on. That uniqueness could be used as the identifier to enable a user to log on to applications, systems, and services in a more accurate and user-friendly way than CAPTCHA or security questions could. It's a really interesting idea and a really interesting article worth checking out. All right, that's all I have for today's headlines. Please check back on Thursday, and I'll have a fresh new batch of headlines for you. But until then, as I said before, get out and vote if you haven't already. And otherwise, please stay safe. We'll see you Thursday.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Tuesday edition of the webinars previews. As always, we have a lot of great webinars on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard, but always have a few that I would like to highlight for everybody. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about 3 that are coming up this week. The first one is called Automatic Guardrails for Enforcing Engineering Best Practices in Cloud Infrastructures. It's happening on Wednesday, November 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern, sponsored by Trend Micro. This webinar takes a look at the growing fragmentation in the adoption of technology in the cloud, and we all know that that can actually lead to issues in performance security and lots of other types of issues. This webinar will actually take a look at how cloud builders are leveraging automatic guardrails to keep their cloud infrastructure secure, compliant, reliable, and optimized for cost, and to give engineers the freedom and flexibility to grow and innovate in the cloud with confidence. The webinar will also take a look at how DevOps and automatic guardrails can be actually used in the DevOps processes to help engineers even more. So as I said, that one is happening Wednesday, November 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. The next webinar is Messaging Connectivity in Hybrid Kubernetes Clouds Environments. This one is also happening Wednesday, November 4th. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Red Hat. The webinar takes a look at the complexity of managing messaging connectivity across applications and data efficiently, and which is all the more so difficult when doing so in Kubernetes environments. This webinar will discuss some of the key considerations that enterprises need to think about when they're building a Kubernetes-based solution in a hybrid environment on the OpenShift platform, and how organizations can use the KubeMQ platform to enable microservices from multiple environments to communicate with each other. And it's also going to offer up an example from one of Red Hat's financial services customers. So definitely one worth checking out if you're having any issues with your messaging connectivity applications. The final webinar today is Outlook for DevOps plus Agile plus VSM. Don't get left behind in 2021. This one is also happening Wednesday, November 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by by Platora. And we all know that 2020 was about a lot of things, but in DevOps, it was a lot about value stream management. So, what's going to be happening in the value stream management space in 2021? Well, this webinar will actually take a look at what's on the horizon for value stream management and DevOps and Agile in 2021, and talk about some of the goals that need to be in place to make value stream management work more effectively for any organization. So this is one that is being hosted by Jeffrey Keyes of Platora and Helen Beal of the DevOps Institute. And together they make a pretty powerful team. So definitely, please, if you do nothing else on Wednesday at 3 p.m., please check out this webinar. It's going to be a good one, I can tell. All right, guys, that's all I have for this edition of the Webinars Preview. Please check back on Thursday for another round of tasty webinars that are coming up on the sites. Until then, please get out there and vote today if you haven't, and otherwise, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Weiss Issa, who is the CEO of a new company called, I believe it's Ubic Security. And if I did not get that right, I'm sure you're going to tell me the correct way to pronounce it. Weiss, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. You nailed it. Perfect.
I nailed it. Yeah. All right. All right. Well, you guys just launched very recently, and you have kind of an API-based encryption platform for developers. Tell me a little bit about your technology.
That's right, Charlene. The challenge we saw in the market was developers are so overtaxed and overburdened with so many different new concepts and pressures that we wanted to tackle the complicated, messy, and frankly, annoying world of encryption and literally simplify it down to 2 API calls and 3 lines of code.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. So you have experience in the cybersecurity space. You used to be the VP of Dell's Sonic Wall, right?
Yeah, I've been basically my entire career in cybersecurity. I think this is year 19. I start off as a hands-on keyboard security operations analyst at Tech. Spent about 9 years there, and then transitioned out to what was then an unknown boutique security consulting firm called Mandiant that really focused on computer crime investigation. But my entire career has been in security.
Okay. All right. Great. So I imagine your what you've learned, your expertise in the field, and what you've seen kind of firsthand has kind of helped formulate the idea behind this company. So do you have a story about the journey you guys came to in creating this company?
Yeah, one of the challenges that we had early on was the cybersecurity market is really crowded and super noisy. And when we started to think through all of our experiences, where are some of the main friction points? Where are things that, another great example is where things just got so complicated and messy that you almost gave up and said, you know what, I don't even want to deep dive into the specific niche or domain area of security. And one thing that came up over and over was this worst kept secret on earth, which is engineering and security don't typically get along. And one of the most frustrating aspects of that is you've got developers building things and you've got security teams showing up typically towards the very end of that development process and starting to ask a bunch of questions. And one of the areas that thematically always comes up is how are you securing the data? What sort of encryption controls are you applying? And generally the answer was from the engineering group, well, that's something that infrastructure would handle, or that's something security would handle after the product is already deployed. And with the emergence of DevOps, which is, the way I describe it is that bridge between engineering and infrastructure, enabling that continuous integration, continuous deployment, I saw an interesting opportunity to kind of insert what I call security as code or control directly into the software development process.
Okay. All right. That goes perfectly in line with the DevSecOps movement, which is, obviously that integration of security into the DevOps process to ensure that, security quote unquote shifts left. So that's great. And it sounds like that's the timing is perfect on your technology. So what is it about this that makes it so easy, and really why haven't other companies come up with the idea before now?
I mean, it's a great question. A lot of people have tackled this problem by trying to figure it out on their own. There's a combination of approaches. One is DIY, which is do it yourself. And you're rolling the dice because rolling your own crypto generally doesn't end in a good way. The other thing is, let's go buy a bunch of security tooling. Well, as an engineer, I'm focused on building a fantastic product. So I'm going to leave the tooling conversation and tooling decisions to either infrastructure or information security. And those teams may not have a true appreciation or understanding of my core application. And a lot of those cryptographic controls are focused on the storage layer. And one of the things that we saw as not only an opportunity to kind of bridge the gap between engineering and security, and not only just to introduce security as code, was can we actually up-level an organization's security posture by improving their threat model and essentially introducing encryption directly into the application itself versus the storage layer, which is really historically where encryption has been focused.
Okay. All right. So do you think that as more organizations adopt DevOps and then, as a natural extension of that, DevSecOps, do you think that technology such as, yours is going to become more mainstream or just, not really thought of as kind of, I think traditionally security has been kind of thought of as kind of that bolt-on kind of last minute thing, to your point that, maybe the security guys are supposed to worry about and the engineers haven't really given much thought to. But do you think that's going to be changing as more organizations recognize the fact that they do need to build better software that is more secure?
Yeah, I do. And the thing is, a lot of people have this misconception that developers don't care about security or DevOps folks don't care. They do. Mm-hmm. DevOps people are passionate about not only their function, but also building a secure product. That's how these concepts like secure by design have all come to be. And the same thing with more traditional engineers, whether you're full stack, front end or back end, there's absolutely an appreciation for not only building a high quality product, but a secure product. Now, the challenge has been for the last 20 or 30 years, it's been disparate functions. It's engineering and there's security. There's engineering, then there's infrastructure. And if you, for a second, think about it, not just as security, but the whole, what people are calling now the API economy, some analysts are calling the composable enterprise. There's just so many benefits in not spending the time trying to figure out really complicated, tangential feature sets and incorporating those as APIs. I'll give you some great examples. Like if I'm building a fantastic transportation app, why should I go figure out maps when I can just turn to Google Maps APIs? Or why should I figure out how to communicate between my passenger and my driver when I can just use Twilio's exceptional messaging capabilities? And I think security is slowly starting to notice some of the more API first platforms and say, well, why am I still stuck shipping appliances and forcing my customers to install software when I can simply introduce these same controls via APIs? And that's one of the early trends and shifts that we saw. And we said, what more complicated, annoying, and messy problem than encryption?
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But isn't there, don't we still kind of need security folk to be a part of the process? I mean, it would be great that if we could, we could flip a switch or inject a line of code and make security, bulletproof. But right now, it just seems like, we're still just, everybody is still running, one step behind the cyber threat. So, where is the role of security operations personnel in this particular setup?
I think their role will always be super important. I think they will play a prominent role. From a security angle, I think when I look at it from a slightly larger organization, call a 500 person and larger, you typically have three distinct roles, and they could be three people, or they could be one individual that has to wear three hats. You've got the traditional engineering or perhaps DevOps individual. You've got the security individual. Then you might have a compliance person. Each one of those individuals plays a super critical role, from engineering, ensuring that they're building something securely, from security, making sure that those are the appropriate controls and those controls best fit for the strategic, risk posture or strategy of that organization, and finally compliance, that's verifying and validating and ensuring if there are any sort of governance frameworks that they need to comply to, that they do, and they could positively demonstrate that.
Okay. All right, great. But you don't ever see a time when, security is just so deeply embedded automatically that there really is not going to be a need for, for security personnel to be involved in the process?
Not anytime in the near future. Maybe a few generations out, possibly, but I don't think so. Not anytime in the near future.
Yeah. We have the conversation a lot about the the dearth of qualified security personnel, and when we're talking about injecting security into the application development process, I think there's a lot of eye rolls that happen simply because everybody's looking at each other saying, I already have so much on my plate. How can I do this? And it's just one more thing that I'm going to have to fit into my daily schedule. What can organizations do short of hiring maybe, I don't know, a security person who just works with the DevOps team to make sure that the security is inserted far enough left in the application development pipeline. But even then, that's a daunting task. So, are we ever going to get to the point where maybe through technology and maybe not, but we are going to get to the point where security is really no longer such an issue for application development and for organizations to include in their process?
I think at some point that the level of effort that's required will reduce over time, but I think the need and having to be on the ball and very aware of what's happening and how things are evolving, I think we'll become even more hypersensitive, because this adage has been used over and over. But we have to be right every single day as security professionals, as DevSecOps and SecOps engineers. The adversary only needs to be right once. So it's their mission and objective, the adversaries, to perform nefarious acts, and that's what they come in and that's what they spend their time doing every single day. Whereas a lot of us are focused on a multitude of things, of which one may be security.
All right. Well, so you guys just launched. When did you launch? Mid-October?
Yeah, we've recently launched our platform, and we've had a number of individuals that have started to use it, and it's been a really great first couple of weeks.
All right. So what should we expect from your company then moving forward?
Continued evolution. We're going to continue to do a really good job. Our focus in the next 6 to 12 months is make sure that our customers have a fantastic experience, that we're delivering to their needs and requirements, and then over time, see what other critical, difficult problems we can help solve for them.
Excellent. Well, I know as the API economy, to your point, advances and more applications are actually developed using APIs. This is going to become a much larger conversation. So hopefully in 6 months or so, Weiss will have you back on, and then we'll talk some more about where the market's heading.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
All right, great. Well, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Well, after Charlene, it's time to go over to the Analyst Corner. Analyst Corner with Mitch, featuring Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell has 3 good videos today. One is with the folks at Axelos, the people behind IDLE. One is with Perforce, as they continue in the player in the DevOps space. And one is with Brian Singer, CPO at Noble 9, up-and-coming company in DevOps SRE. So 3 good interviews. Let's now all go over to Mitchell. Take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, the great pleasure of being joined by a couple of really cool gentlemen here with a great topic I'm excited to talk with you about. First is Akshay Anand, who is product ambassador to Axelos. Also, we have with us John Stevens Hall, principal product manager with BMC Software. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you about this. We're going to jump into IDLE 4, and some of the work that you've been contributing to that. But first, why don't we start up? John, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit about BMC Software. I'm sure many people know that, but just for the folks that don't.
So I'm the principal product manager for BMC's Enterprise ITSM suite, which comes from the Remedy Heritage family of products, now titled BMC Helix ITSM. And I've been around service management for over 20 years now. I sort of walked out of university into my first job in the late 90s, implementing systems for ITIL 2 over at what became Yale Group. And so I've been around service management and ITSM for all that time. And obviously my primary role at BMC is producing and creating software and tools, but also we always try to be active members of the ITSM community in general, which is what sort of led me on a personal basis to being one of the contributors for ITIL 4.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Excellent. And Akshay, how about you?
Sure. So I joined Axelos about 4 years ago. Axelos, for those who don't know, is a joint venture between Her Majesty's government and a private sector company called Capita. We like to see ourselves as the custodians of the IP of not only ITIL, but other best practice frameworks like Prince2, which is about project management, or MSP, which is about program management. I'm product ambassador, so sort of like the product evangelist for ITSM and ITIL in general. My background is mostly around consulting in IT service management, consulting advisory. I've also been head of service management for Macmillan Publishing for a couple of years. And yeah, like I said, I joined Axelos 4 years ago, and it's been a blast.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm sure that consulting and also, John, your experience with BMC gives you some real world perspective on ITIL and ITIL 4. We'll talk about the publications that you've contributed to the IP. I think the create, deliver, and support around ITIL 4 is one of the areas that you both contributed. Do you want to jump in first, Akshay?
Sure. So Create, Deliver, and Support is one of 4 books in a learning stream that we call Managing Professional. All the books in that sort of learning stream are oriented towards managers or professionals who are either managing or designing systems, service management systems. Create, Deliver, and Support in particular talks about things like employee engagement and professionalism, a lot of the commonly used tools needed to create, deliver, and support services, things like value streams, value stream mapping, how to apply value streams within the context of ITIL 4, how to manage suppliers. So it's a very wide-ranging book, but it goes into a lot of detail about very, very specific techniques. 2 of those techniques were actually authored by John, and one was around tickets and the use of tickets or the misuse of tickets and what to avoid. And the other was actually around swarming and how swarming can be a good model to use within service management organizations, and a technique that can be used to foster collaboration between development and engineering teams and frontline support teams.
Interesting. John, love to hear about that. I know, just to share your bias about tickets, I think everybody's impression of IT is you can't talk to IT unless you complete a ticket. Well, maybe that's taken a little bit far, right?
Well, that's definitely a true impression. I mean, one of the things I've spent much of the last 6 years doing is really, I'm a bit of a method actor. I've been very immersed in the DevOps community. Mm-hmm. And almost, I joke that I went to my first DevOps conference by accident because I signed up for something called Configuration Management Camp and thinking, ITSM, CMDB, configuration management. Soon learned very quickly we were talking more Puppet and Chef and Ansible, and went anyway, and it was fantastic because it's opened up a door into a world that has evolved somewhat differently. And there were many aspects of culture that I think IT service management was not understanding very well, which is one of the reasons I was very keen to bring my kind of cross-domain perspective to ITIL 4, because I think a lot of us felt ITIL, bear in mind that version 3 originated before DevOps, it needed a big refresh. And that example of tickets absolutely is true. I mean, people sort of see this negative perception that, to get infrastructure, we used to have to raise a ticket and wait 3 weeks. Now we can log on to a software-defined infrastructure tool, and we can create it right away, and it's all delivered on cloud. And absolutely, I mean, one of the, we sometimes, I think the heritage of IT created these impressions, not in a vacuum, they're not false impressions sometimes. But I mean, ultimately, what is it? A ticket is just a data record that represents a piece of work. And a lot of the work we've done around developing systems at BMC has been to try and sort of take away this, this old way of very sort of skeuomorphically presenting a form to somebody that is all the fields on that piece of work. All the things about that. And I wrote a blog on this a year or two ago where I likened it to an old taxi booking service I used to use in California if I flew to work, where you had to kind of fill in about 3 pages, box. All those things are important pieces probably for the taxi operator. But, this is the world where I can open up my smartphone and press one button and get a taxi. I don't have to care about all that stuff. Likewise, I think where we've had to move on is to sort of, what we've had to learn as a community on the service management side, and maybe, have to convey more to the DevOps world, is that, that we all record units of work. We just don't have to necessarily present it in such a complicated way.
Mm-hmm.
And we can, we should focus on the actual flows and the people, and not this sort of big ticket data problem. We probably still want to know that you're deploying infrastructure, but we don't have to make you fill out a great big form to do it.
Well, and software engineers kind of think in terms of Kanban cards and stories and epics, applying agile kind of things. Have some of those concepts then creeped into the idea around tickets within ITIL 4? Is there some intersection of those ideas at all?
Yeah, go ahead, actually.
Oh, I was going to say, in general, I think we definitely had a lot of inspiration across the entire ITIL 4 contributing team, whether architects, authors, reviewers, etc. There were definitely a lot of people who pulled on a lot of lessons learned from the world of agile software development, of DevOps, and of Lean, and we try to incorporate a lot of that thinking into ITIL 4. It may have been there in ITIL version 3, but it possibly wasn't at the forefront. It wasn't embedded at the heart of the framework. But what we did with ITIL 4 was to say, look, these are important. We need to be able to reinforce continual improvement. We need to be able to reinforce elimination of wasteful work. We need to reinforce, that we're working in complex environments, especially as we're working in environments which are at this level of service management is a mix of human and non-human interactions, and that is inherently complex, and we need to reinforce things like iterative progression and the role of feedback in such a system, and so on. So we brought a lot of those lessons in, whether that was at sort of very foundational models that we used in subsequent publications to present and frame certain arguments, or whether that was highlighting specific techniques like Kanban or I'm drawing a blank, sorry, I haven't had enough coffee. But highlighting specific techniques like Kanban and others in other publications. So there's another publication called High Velocity IT, and coincidentally, John was a contributor to that as well. And in that, we talk about how certain techniques can be used to meet certain objectives in high velocity service organizations, like fast development or creating faster feedback loops at the service level. Sure, we have it at a technical level, but we also need to be able to mirror that or replicate that in some shape or fashion at the service level. So we definitely try to bring in as much of that thinking, foundational thinking from Lean and Agile and other best practices or emerging practices, and bake that into ITIL 4. But for the specifics on how we did that is with queuing and swarming and so on, that's a lot of the stuff that John helped author.
Yeah, awesome. And I think one of the biggest, taking a step back from just the concept, the rethinking about things like tickets, one of the things I'm very happy with, and one of the reasons I was happy to really get involved with ITIL 4, was that it's shifted a lot of thinking, and again, learning from DevOps and Lean in particular, and making us think much more about value than process and control. And of course, that's, that's been a challenge for us to position that we're thinking that way, but ultimately, I want to sort of talk the positive things. I talk to developers in the DevOps world who see huge value in people taking some of the legwork off their workload. So what we all know that those developers are delivering the most value if they're innovating and developing. If we can bring service management techniques, better align it with DevOps, so that any of the support tickets that are coming as developers' way, the issues that inevitably come up and especially as DevOps in enterprises goes from sort of small little startup exercises to big and normal and widespread, suddenly those developers often find themselves doing half of their work resolving issues that have come in, come in from either monitoring or from people. And one thing that service management has done extremely well for a long time is help to kind of industrialize and produce high quality support channels. So what we are in a great position to do is actually, with that focus on value, in a lean culture, if it's not valuable, why the hell are we doing it? By kind of moving on from some of the old concepts, but taking all the things we've done very well and working with the DevOps community with a much better understanding of the way they've learned, drawing off their lessons, but at the same time pushing the fact that there is huge value that we can deliver to help them do what they do, then suddenly this IT service management and the ITIL framework are in a much better position to help those things. And I'm seeing people who were very skeptical before now saying, actually, this is helping to unlock their organization's confidence and give them that ability to go faster with DevOps.
It's really heartening to hear that's the approach that you both have taken with this, because it seems, there's sort of the impression of process for process sake, where no matter what we're talking about. And of course, many folks that are in this highly iterative, right? There's process in the way we create software that way. But if the service management and the software creation processes can better mesh together, right? So that it's not viewed as an impedance when someone gets a ticket, right? And has to kind of conform to an old process, but it flows with how we develop software and release the change that might go through that. I think that maybe that's that continuity that we start to see between ITIL and DevOps and Lean and Agile to help everybody see how it can benefit what we're doing.
I remember a conversation with a gentleman called Greg Sanker, who's the CIO of Oregon State Administrative Services. This is a conversation maybe last summer. And we were talking about the guiding principles that we introduced in ITIL 4. And in particular, we talked about focus on value. As a principle, we need to be able to focus on value. John's just referred to that as well. But what we are talking about is very few teams are are consistently sure on what value means and how value changes for person to person. So, of course, there's value for our customers who are using the software and the applications that we're deploying. But there's also value for your risk officer. There's value for your supplier. There's value for your CFO. Now, a lot of these people aren't involved in the actual use of the software day to day. They're not involved in the development of the software, etc. But we've got to be able to architect the solutions, the service management wrapper around it, et cetera, to be able to create that value. Now, part of the reason why sometimes IT service management and ticketing that you were mentioning has a bad reputation is that's how that assurance was created at a certain point in time. But we now have to go back and say, look, because technology has changed, we've removed certain risks that we were trying to mitigate 10 years ago, but we've introduced new risks that we didn't have 10 years ago. So what does that assurance now need to look like? How do we re-architect our systems to accomplish that same assurance? How do we introduce more automation, remove the toil, etc., while in order to provide that assurance?
Yeah. It's almost like the ticket was almost the kind of the manifestation of the internal memo in a digital system, the old paper memo. I mean, I'm old enough to remember those envelopes where you crossed out the old address and put the next one on, and they went around the internal mail system. But that it is important to remember that these processes actually helped us to move that kind of customer support in the technical world from adhocracy and post-it notes to a proper, robust, scalable solution. That moved us on to self-service, to knowledge management, to proper kind of properly established professional ways of handling and resolving issues that are now extremely valuable when DevOps goes big in organizations and hits the mainstream and hits a large body of users and starts having to deal with support issues. The more stuff we can use these established service management practices, albeit modernized, heavily rethought, focused much more on value than process for process sake, the more we can do that, the better, and this is proving itself over and over again with our customers, the better it actually helps us to enable DevOps to go, to accelerate, to deliver that huge value that we know it can create.
Well, it seems like some of the process and the The auditability, if you want to think of the benefits of why you have processes, right? So consistency and reaction to issues and resolving them. Those are some things that can actually benefit people that are working in a high velocity environment, because sometimes that can be a bit chaotic, or it's just, extremely fast. Obviously, things are happening very quickly. And then when you need to start interfacing with other parts of the organization, whether it's, do we do vulnerability scanning for the security group? How are we handling resolution time for production issues? That's where that intersection can really be helpful. And some of those well-defined processes and ways of measuring value from an operational standpoint, development teams don't have to do that because you've already done that through ITIL 4 in the process, right?
And also one of the good things in ITIL 4 that we've been able to do is actually learn very much, hands-on from DevOps. So one of the big subject areas that's really growing in interest on both sides, as it were, I don't like using the word sides, but you know where I'm coming from, is this idea of using more swarming technique than kind of the traditional structures. And so this is a really good example because, very traditionally service management has kind of operated a 3-tier support structure where you'll kind of have a front line at tier 1, which will try and probably mostly successfully fix most minor things. Then if they can't, they'll escalate to a more expert level tier 2. Back in the day, that would have been the service desk agents who then did their Microsoft certificates, for example, and became a slightly more specialist team. And then things that can't be solved there, that 5-10%, whatever, would end up with tier 3 teams who are more likely to be developers, specialists. There's nothing wrong with having those teams, but what is wrong is a couple of things. The first is that issues can often take a long time to get to that team because what we're effectively doing is putting queues in the way. So it goes into the tier 2 queue. Someone then has X hours or days to pick it up, so it sits in that queue. It then goes to tier 3 and sits in a queue. And by the time it's got there, we've already got an angry customer, even though everyone might have met their operational agreements. The other thing that happens is the sort of ping pong effect where, if it goes to a tier, these things that get, especially to the tier 3 level, they might need input from several development teams. They might need a database team to have input to it. They might need a network team, whatever. And with these kind of traditional silos, although they're, if the ticket's not going to leave that silo, it's absolutely the right place for it to be. If the issue, I should talk issues, but things ping around and you end up with problems like champions emerging, who's the one person everybody knows can fix it every time. And so they pay their mortgage off in overtime, but they always look a bit unhealthy. And then they leave the company and everybody's in trouble. So swarming has helped us. Actually, it really is taking much leaner techniques. It's about sort of being more dynamic in the way things are brought together as a team, tearing down some of these silo structures, and in particular, removing queues of unfulfilled work in progress. So now we're really learning directly from Lean, really learning directly from the DevOps focus on having much better flow and reducing handoffs, and in particular, not letting things build up in queues.
For someone that's not familiar with swarming, describe how that would work in this context.
Okay, well, I mean, at BMC, we've done this in our own customer service team for a while, and what it effectively means is a couple of things. You'll always have the kind of the most severe issues have always pretty much been swarmed everywhere, and that's everything's on fire, so we'll get everybody we need into a room and we'll sort it out, and so that's always kind of been the most basic form of swarming, even though we haven't really called it that. And that's not really where the novelty is. For us, the novelty is we've collapsed that tier 1 and tier 2. So instead of having that kind of chain where somebody fairly qualified takes a look, and then if they can't fix it, somebody more qualified takes a look, we kind of put those two people together. And instead of waiting for things to trickle through queues, we look at the things as they're coming in. Those support people will maybe every hour just look at what's coming in that hour and be very reactive. We can fix those 3 things. We'll just get it done. We'll qualify the rest very well. And you get this lovely sort of information sharing between the 2 levels as well. So they learn from each other. I think pair programming is an interesting analogy from the modern software development world. But so that actually increases the flow very, very significantly through those first, it gets things fixed quicker and it increases the throughput. Then when things do go to the sort of the tier 3 product specialist groups, they're not allowed to start assigning it around other tier 3 groups. So if they've got one of these more complicated issues, instead of doing that, they'll pull together a group of people into a swarm and work it that way. And it's all, they've got a lot of leeway to be very self-organizing, which again probably doesn't sound like the impression that service management of old has given. So it's not that rigid, that they will figure out what works best for their team. So we have some teams hold 3 sessions a day at fixed times and people can come in with issues. We have others that spin things up on a more ad hoc basis. But the interesting point is there, again, things are not going from bucket to bucket, queue to queue. They're being owned by the person who kind of who takes command of them. And we've found there's really great engagement, people coming together in what, in a Microsoft Teams session or on a call or face-to-face way back when. And again, it looks a lot more like the kind of practices that have evolved in the DevOps community. So again, we're learning to sort of focus on delivering the value rather than focus on adhering to a predefined rigid process.
Mm-hmm. Jump in there, Akshay. I know you were trying to, I think it may have stepped on what you were going to say, so jump in.
Oh no, I think it works. As John was saying, back in the day, or probably even still to this day, every time there's a like a priority 1 incident or a severity 1 incident or one of those really big thing, everything's on fire type of thing. We used to call it a war room back in the day. We used to have conference bridges back in the day. So that technique was perhaps limited in its application, but we're now starting to see how that same technique is being, if you will, scaled down or scaled down to the appropriate size and being used across the support organization and not just limited for use to, the buildings falling down type of issues.
And one of the great things that's happened as we've sort of distributed this messaging and talked more about it is actually it's got huge engagement in the DevOps community. I've presented on this at a number of DevOps events, right up to DevOps Enterprise Summit, because actually what I believe it's doing is it's sort of showing the DevOps community that, there is not only is the support, the world of kind of technical support and service management, that sort of structured technical customer support and service management, we're looking to try and offer value to the DevOps community, but we're also doing it in a way that is much better aligned with the way the DevOps community has learned to work. So rather than those developers ending up just being treated as a third line support team and having things thrown over the fence to them, it enables us to kind of bring a much more collaborative system together and reduce those kind of pockets of, those silos where knowledge doesn't escape. So the value, again, thinking about the value again to those teams working in the DevOps world is that we can actually be embedding support people much closer to what they do, and those support people learn how to fix the issues. And then when there's more of those issues, those support people are there as professional support, as support professionals who are good at this kind of thing, can be figuring out ways to proactively resolve those things, automate those processes, move towards customer self-service as an ultimate goal perhaps, or self-healing, and get those developers developing.
Yeah, it also gives them more closely aligned in knowledge about what the application is, how it's structured, who to contact, help them maybe even diagnose more of the issues themselves.
Yeah, so again, it perhaps creates some parallels with what, again, companies like Google have innovated with site reliability engineering.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite the same. These are not necessarily developers, and I often caution people from kind of just saying you can just do SRE. You can get service management kind of spaces like the service desk and do SRE. You're not really doing SRE in the strict sense the way it's known in the DevOps community, where it is kind of a developers doing proactive things with infrastructure. If you look at an SRE job spec, it's going to be a bunch of programming languages and related experience. But we can still take, again, those learning principles, the idea, for example, of thinking in terms of error budgets, so rather than every failure being a major, something to, so every loss, every time we lose a bit of our remaining availability budget against that target, that could be that's always been seen as negative, I think. But what SRE has introduced is the concept of actually using some of that spare availability capacity to be proactive and make things work better.
Mm-hmm.
I like an analogy I draw is, why don't we take somebody off the service desk calls for an hour? It means then our call pickup percentage is 98% instead of 99%, but they could spend that time doing something that really, really drives improvement. So again, these techniques that have evolved in DevOps really sort of cross-pollinate well in the service management space and enable us to better connect to the way DevOps works, and again, help them develop.
Mm-hmm. Well, excellent. This has been fascinating. Really enjoy talking, and I'm sure the audience does too that's listening in. It's great to talk to the contributors, to the authors of this, because you get the benefit of both your writing and knowledge that's shared in that medium, but also what was the thinking behind it? What were the influences, and how did you get to those conclusions? And sort of that context is also super helpful. So this has been really great. I've enjoyed talking with both of you.
Same here.
Great. Well, my thanks to Akshay Anand, who's product ambassador with Exelos, and Stevens Hall, principal product manager at BMC Software. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Mitch. And thank you for listening to us today.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm happy to be joined by Stuart Foster, who's product manager with Perforce, and Steve Howard, static code analysis evangelist, and I think a lot of other things too. Does a lot with Perforce. So welcome, gentlemen. Good to be talking to you today.
Thanks, Mitch.
Hello. We're talking about, Perforce does a lot of things, and I think we're just kind of focusing on what maybe some of the current conditions, current best practices are. There's a lot of happening right now in everybody's world, a lot of change, a lot of disruption. But before we get to that, could I have you both introduce yourself? Maybe Stuart, would you start first?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Foster. I'm Perforce's product manager for our static code analysis products.
Great. Steve?
Yeah, and I'm, I have, as you say, many jobs and roles within the organization, but primarily focusing on the evangelism around using static code analysis for both of our products, Clockwork and QAC here at Perforce. Yeah.
If you're working with developers, you got to be doing evangelism, right? They expect you to give them support and be talking to them in a different kind of way. Tell us, would one of you tell us a little bit about Perforce and what all you all do?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll take that. So, Perforce as an organization, obviously, as originally comes out of the version control software, but really, it's about developer tools and how we can help make the developer's life easier in their day-to-day tasks. So, whether that be trying to prove compliance to standards, or just trying to get the stuff out the door in the first place, anything that we can do to help make that process smooth and reliable is kind of where we are. And these days that has a bit of a buzzword, if you will, around the DevOps tooling ideas, but essentially it's developer tools and making their life more comfortable.
That's great, because you all fit into a number of places in the sort of tool chain, pipeline workflow process across the development lifecycle. Right. So That's awesome. Well, let's get into this. I'm really curious about what you're finding in market. And one of the things we like to do, when I'm talking with experts like yourself, is really just try to share some of the things that we've experienced, both in the past, but also kind of recently that's happening, because we're all dealing with economic change, disruption, COVID, work from home, all of those kind of things. But, we've done some research at my company, and there's a lot, of course, a great emphasis and acceleration of digital strategies, and of course that puts a lot of pressure and emphasis, and people are betting money on software being the answer to helping them implement their strategies. Are you seeing the same kind of thing, that acceleration of digital transformation and software, elevation of software projects?
Yeah, we're seeing that across the board. Even in our own company here, a lot of us have transitioned to work from home, and then you have to start thinking about the considerations for that, right? And what we're finding ourselves and working with our customers is a lot of people are shifting to more technological tools, right? To be able to better produce workflows and code reviews, how to working from home, security, right? How secure are your remote development workstations? How is security being built into your software and your workflows? So tools are being used across the board for that. Just being able to rely on a piece of software versus in office workflow has become more and more important. And and amongst all that, then there's the goal to keep development velocity up, which could be a challenge when working from home, right? So we're seeing a lot more DevOps automation of a lot of workflow processes and things like that.
Yeah, there's no more popping over the edge of the cube or or to the table next to you, right? Somebody sitting there at the cafe in the office or down the street. It's a fully digital world, right? You're not sitting with people very often.
Yeah, we're relying on Slack. We're relying on Slack calls, Zoom videos, everything to just stay in touch and work and collaborate with one another. Yeah.
But I think that's where.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, I think that's where those centralized processes that we've kind of all been working towards, but luckily for the last few years, are really going to pay off. Because had we not had that, if you imagine how things were maybe 5 years ago, it would have been a much bigger transition to get to where we are now. Whereas it was almost like most of our organization was kind of ready to go. We were already there. Just you could call it foresightful, but really it was a little bit of chance, I think. But those processes have held things together remarkably well, and we're very lucky for it.
Nobody would wish, of course, something like COVID or a pandemic on any of us. But if you look back, I think back of when we were virtualizing things and developers were starting to be able to just create a fully self-contained environment to develop on their laptop. I saw people working on planes, right? First time I saw somebody writing code on a plane. That's awesome. But so many things. And then, of course, adding the cloud and all the services and software and tool chains and pipelines that we can create now. I think we're lucky if you were going to have something like this happen. Now is the time where we can actually continue to be productive and put more emphasis and more pressure on ourselves to deliver software. So you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, sure.
We agreed at the same time. That was great. But you're right. I think like some of it, it's a little bit accidental. But as you mentioned, setting up the development workflow, to be able to do it on a laptop. People are shifting their hardware. They're removing their hardware and going to the cloud, right? So it's kind of been like an expansion and a reduction, all just naturally. But also, you think about DevOps, and there's also cost savings to be had by not having to have these footprints, not having to worry about these things. So this could be, in some ways, pretty revolutionary or changing for development costs for a lot of companies.
Steve, you were going to jump in there. Anything to add?
Yeah, no, exactly the same. I think the fact is that we, a lot of that infrastructure is being built up, and the idea of being able to run our development pipelines kind of in a cloud environment or whatever, and having that all ready to go just meant that we didn't have to pick up ginormous workstations. I remember back in my days of developing in aviation software, we used to literally have Unix boxes stacked up on the side somewhere that we had to go and log in on each one and run our testing for each single. It's just unthinkable. It would never have been possible.
That would be insane today. You would never, you have a choice. You would never do that. Right?
Yeah, well, exactly. And the very fact that, 10 years ago, we still had to do that. How could we have transitioned? It wouldn't have been possible. And so it really is testament to how far we've really come in 10, 15 years to see where we are with our testing processes, the fact that we can do, 99% of it, if not all of it, can be done completely with no connection to the physical space. It's all, and that can even mean, in the cloud completely. So it's not even within our organization. It's securely being done offsite somewhere in the ether. And that process is still completely manageable. It's something we can all see as developers. Everyone can get to see where we currently are with that process, what the latest test run gave us across the whole.
Curious. I'm really curious what your experience in market is. Do you see more people who are kind of doubling down and getting even more serious about their DevOps implementation and taking it to the next level? Or do you see more people coming to you that maybe are relatively new to DevOps and are looking for tooling and looking for ways of helping them, not just get started and learn all the problems and themselves, experience them themselves, but looking from the experience of a software provider like yourself? Or is it a little bit of both?
I'd say a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, initially, there was such a lot to do already. Everyone kind of had no time to really think, understandably. But probably within the, since the end of the summer, maybe things have started to come back, and people are actually going, well, hang on a minute, we've got a process, but now how can we actually make this a lot easier for ourselves, and looking to improve that. And I think, for a lot of the organizations where perhaps doing things offsite would never have even been considered, and I think this was to Stuart's point, that's been forced upon people, and it's almost going to change the way we develop forever now as a result of that, because we have we've done it, we've experienced it's possible, and it's safe and it's secure. How can we now make that better and make our life easier by not having that massive footprint, as Stuart was mentioning? We've actually got something that's very, very lean. It's in the cloud. We've got machines when we need them, but not when we don't need them. And how can we really make that process as efficient as possible from the results side, making sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing as quickly as possible, but also actually trying to reduce our footprint on processor power, for example, or development time that's involved in that. How can we make that as efficient as possible?
Yeah, and I also think what we're seeing too is, our existing customers, they're doubling down on their tools, because they need to rely on something, right? That's also what it's done is also, I think, is changing some of the roadmap items that all products are looking at, right? There's a whole new, not a whole new paradigm, but there's a little bit more seriousness being taken in terms of some of these features and functionalities of being able to work remote, or the requirements for more cloud usage, right? We're talking ease of use. We're talking about things that are related to workflows to make working in these conditions, not just in these conditions, as soon as you get back to the office, just more efficient as well. So we're seeing that at the same time too. And then, from the perspective of new customers coming in, they're almost expecting these things to already be there, right? Because they've run up to, these problems as COVID has created, and they're trying to find the solutions that are going to be kind of turnkey out of the box. And also, we've been talking with various analysts related to our product, but it seems as though the analyst community itself they're seeing the requirement for ease of use in DevOps becoming more important as well at the same time.
I think that may be also in part the expansion of DevOps into the organization. You may have had a core group of teams that were really taking the challenge of DevOps and implementing it, and now how does the rest of the organization do the same thing but accelerate their adoption of it?
Yeah, and I think also a lot of development groups, or within a single company, you may have a security team, you may have a development team, you may have a live ops team. They're starting to recognize that there are choke points in the development processes, and so how do you unblock that? How do you make it more easy? How do you offload some of that choke point onto a broader group, right? A lot of the idea of DevOps, DevSecOps, whatever you want to call it, right, is that developers are owning the code that they produce in more broad ways. That's writing unit tests. That's making sure they do the QA on it, right? That's when they're they have to implement the security requirements then and there, right? They need to ensure the traceability is done, right? They're taking that into their hands. It's becoming not so much that there's a DevOps group that magically handles all this infrastructure. It's becoming part of each developer's responsibility as well, right?
Interesting. I know as you scale things out and you adopt new tools, tools do a lot of things for you. But there's oftentimes approaches that you need to adapt into your tools. Things like, what are our coding standards? What are our testing? What level of testing do we do? How do we break it into chunks? When do we do security testing of our code? And that's part of that learning curve too, is how do you adapt a tool set to both what your requirements are, but also you'd like it to kind of take you to the next level. What are some of those things that really can help people kind of propel their expertise of the organization's ability to deliver software more effectively?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So one of the things you mentioned coding standards there, but obviously, those can come from multiple sources. They can be something that's actually being required by a standard, for example, if it's in a safety critical or security critical world. It could be something that's actually demanded by the organization itself. They have their own rules, or there's certain things in a particular project that if you do things in a certain way would make, it'd be dangerous or insecure or something. So they have some controls as well at that level. And what we do see is the more that we can get that information out to our developers, for example, the more value that has as well. So yes, we can help enforce coding standards, for example, with our static analysis tools, but that's only half the story. Enforcement is one thing. Actually getting the developers to understand what the problems are as they're creating them, and to have easy access to the help and the quick feedback of those problems makes it much more powerful, because it gives them all the resources they need to deal with the problem quickly, and to not perhaps find it a challenge to have to deal with, but also they learn. And so the next piece of code they write doesn't generally have the problem. So there's a developer learning element there as well, which we can control centrally and then spread out to all of these remote workers working, without that team collaboration that we used to have, we're still able to do the same thing. So that's become something that's really, focused people's minds on the capability there in terms of what that means. And as I say, that applies to, security standards that are well known, or requirements for quality that we have to work to for a security or a safety standard, but also the company's own rules.
Yeah, and I think, outside of just simply the tools, development teams are, taking a step back and reevaluating, or, thinking more about what their software development process is holistically, right? Steve mentioned there, some of the tools, best practices, but, you also have to think what kind of software development methodologies might you be using. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether it's agile, waterfall, whether you're using like Scrum or Kanban. I think it's giving people a moment to think about what's the most important kind of dev process that is going to fit this team, or how you have to work now, how it fits the businesses, and then implementing processes to ensure the organization, communication, and what systems need to be put into place to help prevent any problems that arise during development, and in kind of identifying and understanding that, then you're picking the tools, you're building your development workflow, whether it's in environments, it's setting up DevOps pipelines to ensure that everything's followed correctly. It's the tools, but it's the process, and that's changed too.
It's interesting. We've done some research about the influence that developers have had on the organization too. Even outside of development teams, you're seeing DevOps and Agile kind of principles, even though they aren't calling it that, daily stand-up meetings, shorter intervals of deliverables, more kind of asynchronous communication tools and collaboration kind of tools, which really makes it easier, I think, for the development teams, the product teams, your product manager, yourself, Stuart, and beyond, operations, security, everyone is kind of forced to work a little bit differently, but also can benefit from what each other knows about how to do that more effectively. And we seem like we're at this sort of serendipitous time of being able to leverage that, which fits right into the tooling approaches that we can take.
Yeah, and when you look at it, like it always just ends up communication. Whatever the communication is, whether that's the workflow, whether that's in person, whether that's meeting, whether that's documentation, it's all about communication. And that's true not for just development, but for business, right? Developers working, with other groups, marketing, sales, everything. It's all communication. It just keeps business running, and that's kind of the funny kind of perspective that may not necessarily be outright visible by simply saying it's communication.
What's interesting is that's also kind of mirrored in the tooling, because a lot of the work we've been doing recently is about how to make sure the tools have all got open interfaces to communicate with the next thing in the pipeline, or to feed that data back up to some dashboard that's going to be shared with the rest of the team. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting point, but that also applies with the tooling that we're trying to build around that.
Mm-hmm. A really great point. Just to give you fair warning, I'm going to ask you your 3 recommendations on best practices in the current climate. So be thinking about that. I was thinking about your comment, Steve, about being able to better integrate tools together, and then taking the data from the tool sets, the pipeline of the process that we're going through, and the pipeline of work. There's so much value in that data that sometimes ends up as exhaust or on the cutting room floor, right, to use 2 different metaphors. But that information could be extremely valuable, putting it into dashboards, feeding it into continuous improvement processes, shortening the window for getting feedback for here's a security vulnerability or a coding standard or some kind of an error that you can fix in minutes instead of days and weeks and sometimes months, right? There's the security audit at the end of the release is much easier because you've already gone through so much of it. Those can all be things that can help us. So I gave you a little bit of time there to think about your 3 best practices. I did my best job of stalling that I could. So who would like to go first? What would you recommend people consider today?
Yeah, I'll go. I want to reinforce that message of figuring out how you're going to work as a development team, develop that communication, right? And that's using your tools. I think in the world of remote work from home, having kind of a common language, again back to communication, of how each developer's system set up. So common environments, they should be using as close to the same setups as possible, so that when one of you is running into an issue, it's easier to get that information across, right? You're not going to have to install something obscure because somebody's using something obscure. You should all be trying to talk and use the same tools, so you're all speaking the same language. That allows you to have that velocity that you could otherwise lose. And in this world too, security hasn't been more important than ever. Security is more important than ever. So think about securing, your dev processes, developing secure software. It's going to be very important. And those are kind of my 3.
Okay, great. All good ones. Steve?
Yeah, and I'd add to that. So my 3 would be, first of all, to automate, take the process away from, the day-to-day effort of the development teams and organizations around them. So yeah, that's the first one. Report. So that's the communication piece, I guess, but get the information to the right people at the right time, and hopefully the right sort of time window. And then shift left. So then we make it more efficient. Then we look to where we can try to remove the fat in the process and take away the time that was wasted and try and move it to the right position in that process. So yeah, those 3 in that order.
Okay, excellent. I'm curious what you both think will be some of the things that will stay with us, the things that will last past a forced work at home, forced work remote. Maybe people are returning to the office, maybe they aren't. What do you think some of the things that will stick with us? Because it wasn't like we're doing this for 2 weeks and then we just go back to the office. This is an extended period. We're developing new habits. We're changing how we're working. Why go back sometimes, right? What are your thoughts?
I think you're going to see a lot of these workflows stay around. I think the reliance on the numerous tools to keep velocity up and reduce and automate are just going to stick around. You don't want to be wasting time on trying to get something to work. It's easier to just simply automate it and get out of your hands, so that at least from a development perspective, you can just focus on what's important, which is, coding the feature, getting the product out the door, right? Those are going to stick around. And I think the tools over the course of time are just going to keep reinforcing and strengthening that kind of automation pipeline.
Yeah, no, and I think from my perspective, just to add, the one small piece that is the cloudification essentially of the processes. So I think people will stop having the premises to host great big server racks in, and that's just all going to move off-site, off-premise, outside of organization for sure. Yeah,
yeah. To kind of add what you both have said, which I think supports your thoughts on this, is as we change to whatever we're going to go back to, I don't think it's going to be back to what we're doing, but it's going to be a hybrid, right? I can't imagine everyone's shifting back to a different way. Some people are still, maybe more percentage of our teams are working remotely, never going back into an office, but we may have some that do. We broaden the reach across the globe of the people that we're working with, the product and tool vendors that we're working with. Those things aren't going to change, right? We're going to stay doing that. If we found something that works better, you're going to stick with it, right? So you're going to stay in the cloud, push more in the cloud, right? And leverage some of the automation and the processes that you talked about, Stuart. Well, this has been really fascinating. Love to have you both back, have you guys back, and we can talk some more about, I want to delve into static code analysis evangelist, your role, Steve, get into some of that, which I know you all have some of your products do, and into security and to some other areas within the software pipeline. But this has been really great. Really enjoyed talking with you both.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mitch.
Goodbye.
You bet. We'll see you soon.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I have the pleasure of being joined by Brian Singer, who's Chief Product Officer with Noble 9. Great to be talking with you, Brian.
Hey, Mitch. Super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I'm excited to get to some of the news we have that you're here to talk about. But first, let's learn a little bit about you. Tell us about yourself and about Noble 9.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Product Officer at Noble 9. Before Noble 9, I've started a few different companies and also spent some time at Google. And through those experiences, got very interested in how reliability ties into how a customer experiences a product. I've been on both ends of that, both as a user of products over time and also as somebody in charge of the product and responsible for the reliability, and have come to understand that that's something that really drives customer satisfaction over time. So Noble 9 is a company that we started to focus on helping organizations establish clear goals when it comes to reliability and measure those goals and sort of make it something that's woven throughout the fabric of the product and the company.
Fantastic. What a great space to be in. Operations is cool again with SRE and SLOs and a lot of great things, which is awesome to see such a vital, important part of our business. Well, tell us about the announcement. Just happened within a couple of days ago. What's happening?
Yeah, so we've been working on the product pretty heads down for about a year and have had it in the hands of early beta customers and testers and evaluators, and have been iterating on that feedback with the goal of opening it up to more folks. And so we're very excited to announce that we have now pushed that into open beta. So we're taking pretty much anyone that wants to try the product at this point. We're not a GA product yet, and as a company that's focused on measuring reliability, obviously we have to be very reliable ourselves. So we're cautious when it comes to rolling something out into general availability, which is why we have this open beta period. But we're sort of at a point where the feedback that we've been getting from customers is, hey, we want to get this, we want to roll it out into production. We're ready to go. So we're really excited to have this in the hands of more organizations, and we're excited about the impact that it can have for people, not just in terms of helping them make their own products and systems more reliable, but also really in improving people's lives. Alex Hidalgo, who is part of our company, says that SLOs and reliability, are something that can improve folks' lives, because you're not sitting sort of in fear of the pager, and you have a really good understanding of how the dependencies in your system works and what drives reliability throughout your product and throughout your business. So that's what we're really excited about in terms of the announcement, and we're hoping to have this beta period go pretty quickly, and then roll this product out to GA.
Yeah, Alex literally wrote the book. He is the expert. So congrats to you. He's been on before. Very excited about being at Noble 9. So he's jazzed about me being with you folks. Well, tell us some more about the product. So this is a service level platform for implementing service level objectives. And he and I talked a lot about that, and sort of setting metrics and objectives is a process you have to learn, right? And certainly tools and systems that can help you with that, I imagine, is where you're trying to hit the mark on.
Yeah. I mean, SLOs start with people, right? They're really about people understanding the systems and setting the goals. But the tooling can be incredibly important in making that process go smoothly. So there's a few things that we really focused on in building the product. One was to have a very developer-friendly experience. So the product itself is both usable through a GUI, but also everything that's in the GUI can be done through a GitOps flow. So many customers choose to really create SLOs as code, SLOs as code, we like, as we like to say, and
SLOs as code. Okay, I've heard that before, but like it.
Yeah, and you should be doing that if you aren't already. But then the objective in terms of reliability is something that can get checked in along with the service definition, so that anyone who is trying to support the product or understand how that service is running or supposed to be running has a very objective view of it. And then it's something that's versioned. And as you improve that over time, as you improve your understanding of the service over time, you have a change log and you have reviewers and you have all those things. So that was something that was important. The other thing is transparency. As organizations move to sort of more service-oriented architectures, I'm sure you've talked about here in depth, you have team ownership of these services, and you have a lot of dependencies between services. Establishing clear reliability objectives and making them visible and transparent throughout the organization to engineers, other engineers, product managers, and management is something that was really core to how we built the product as well. So that's why I think we're a little bit different than maybe some other monitoring products out there. We're focused entirely on the question of how reliable are my systems, and that data, really the third pillar for us, that data comes from a variety of systems. Your metric system, of course, but logging systems as well. And we have customers that have really critical reliability data that just lives in a Postgres database somewhere, right? You have to be able to just query that out as well. So bringing all of those various sources together is really the only way we've found that you can get a comprehensive view of reliability.
Mm-hmm. There's, with automation and so many things like that, we have such a proliferation of data exhaust that kind of comes off the DevOps workflow, and tools like Datadog and New Relic and Prometheus, and the list could go on and on, right? It's one of the key things, though, I learned from Alex is, it's not about having a bunch of metrics. It's about having the right few metrics.
Exactly.
And, is that something that you've focused on, of helping people identify that, or at least focusing on those in how you're reporting it?
Yeah. So again, there's the human element to it. understanding how your systems work and really how the customers are using the product. No product I build can ever tell you how your customers are using the product, like, better than you would know yourself. But there's some things that you can look at once you have that understanding in terms of what are the right indicators, and you can do statistical analysis on those to start to try to understand what are the right objectives, or at least what is a starting point for these objectives. What we've found is it's really challenging to find that starting point. Once you get people on the path to measuring these things, and you create that feedback loop, the measurement and the tuning of the objective tends to get much better over time. But just getting that starting point of like, we should start here. We know it's probably not the right number is something that we focused on in the platform and that we're sort of continuing to push the envelope on. And it differs based on obviously what you're measuring and where that data is coming from. Stuff coming out of a metrics store like a Datadog looks very different than maybe some logs that are coming out of Sumo Logic or LogDNA, and you're worried about different things. So again, bringing those data sources together into one view, and then creating, I think, some continuity between those metrics. When you talk about your operations in terms of SLOs, one of the big benefits is that you're no longer talking about like CPU usage or memory usage or queries per second. You're only worried about an error rate, and you're worried about sort of a percentage, right? And that's true across anything that you measure with SLOs. So if I can come in not knowing anything about your service, maybe I want to consume that service. Maybe you're running some sort of cache, right, that I could make use out of, and I want to understand, can I put this sort of in the critical path for my application? Well, I can go look at your SLOs and say, well, this is or isn't reliable enough for me, without understanding anything about how you're actually monitoring that service. And that's something that's incredibly powerful, and I think large organizations that are adopting SLOs have really latched onto.
It's a really good point, because we're not just talking about monitoring up, down, hit the threshold, below the threshold. We're talking about perception of reliability and service for customers.
Exactly.
And that's a continuous learning process, right? It's learning organization. It's saying we think this is the objective, but we'll learn more as we get into it and really refine it. And a good example I've heard is, you might wait 3 or 4 or 5 seconds for a streaming movie to start. That's acceptable. But if I'm sitting there, buffering every 10 minutes and I'm waiting 5 seconds to, you just stopped in the important part, the second or third time I'm gone. That is not acceptable. So it's in that context. And it's in, so much of it's in the end customer, the user's perception. So it is a learning process.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think, no matter what you're trying to do, I have great examples from batch processing, for example, where customers are expecting a job to take a certain amount of time. Maybe it's, call it 2 hours. And if it takes 3 hours, it's fine. But if it takes 24 hours, it's not. And if that happens once, they're probably okay with it. And so you can start to see that, okay, we can create a threshold here. Maybe it's 2 or 3 hours. It doesn't have to be exact, right? And we don't need to hit it all the time. But if, half the time you're not meeting that threshold, then you have a real problem. Mm-hmm. And getting that clarity in terms of how are you going to prioritize your engineering resources to understand, like, are we good enough? And on the flip side of that, maybe we've spun up so much infrastructure to run that batch job that we're just, we're blowing customers' expectations away every time. Well, that's not great either, right? Because that's probably eating into your margin. So you want to be good enough that you're meeting their expectations, but you don't want to be in a position where you're spending a ton of money to exceed those expectations continuously with really little or no return in terms of customer satisfaction.
It's something I like to say about the DevOps process. More releases per day, per hour don't matter if they aren't the right things, right? And so you're talking about how do you focus on the right results or outcomes.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about what form is this in? Are we talking about, open source software? Are we talking about a SaaS kind of service? Are we talking about on-prem, only in the cloud? What's the delivery look like for the service level platform?
For SaaS service today, we give you obviously a user interface as well as an API that you can push YAML to. And we have plans in the future to extend that to an on-prem or maybe like a bring your own cloud model. So we're entirely built in Kubernetes with minimal dependencies on the cloud provider. It's hard to take no dependencies on a cloud provider, but I think one of the interesting things to do today is make those trade-offs between, hey, I can use the service, and what would it cost me to re-architect now if I wanted to move from provider A to provider B. So that's something that we have a lot of fun with, sort of making those trade-offs. But the plan is eventually sort of make it available where customers want it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So this is not a trick question. I'm really curious, given you're an SLO-centric company. I mean, that's what you're about with your platform. I can imagine you probably have implemented some of those things yourself. It's early in your product lifecycle, right? Open beta. Yep. Are there some learnings you've had already from SLOs in Noble 9? Yeah,
definitely. And I think one of those learnings is, even when we know what we're doing, it is still incredibly difficult to get started with SLOs because systems are complex. And so, what we've tried to do is we've tried to really identify those customer journeys that matter, and then tap the systems that are in that critical path. And then we have SLOs that are at the user journey level, and also that touch on those individual systems. Because if we're going to go make changes at a code level to some Kafka queue, we want to understand how that impacts the SLO for the user journey and for Kafka in particular. So it's really just, what we've learned is you can't do enough in terms of providing support to get started, providing those default settings, templates and whatnot. And we've tried to bring that back into the product as well. I would say the other thing is that creating SLOs is really a company-wide process. So we've tried to get, obviously the engineers are involved who know the systems, but we've tried to get the CEO involved. We've tried to get sales involved. We've tried to get, obviously myself as a product manager involved. And that helps us get a whole understanding of what the customer is going to care about. And everyone's on the same page then. When, your salesperson is saying, hey, can we just ship this one feature for this customer, and it's going to help us close the deal, right? If that's going to impact reliability, you can go back to them and say, well, this is what we agreed on for reliability. You told me that customers need it to work in this particular fashion. And if we do this, right, we're going to be at risk of breaching our SLO. So again, it helps getting everyone involved early on, helps with creating a policy and then getting everyone to follow those policies, when the rubber meets the road.
Mm-hmm. Implementing something like continuous improvement, you obviously need data. You want to make data-driven decisions, and oftentimes adapting other tools where it might be sources of that data certainly is necessary and useful, but you spend your time kind of building the tool, the platform, the architecture to do that. So I can imagine you're focusing on those user journeys is designed to really target this specific application of data-driven decision-making and measurement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a great example that Alex Hidalgo uses is, making the decision to roll back, right? Sometimes you're going to roll something out and it's going to have some negative customer impact. It might be a config change or new front-end code or whatever the case may be. And it's very hard to answer the question sometimes of, is this damaging enough to the customer's experience that I should roll it back? Well, if you've established SLOs and you have a very objective measure of, what enough is, then you can make that decision, right? Whether hey, let's just keep this out there. It's a little bit slower, but it's not slow enough that customers are really gonna be upset about it, and we can improve it maybe in the next release. Or no, we got to roll this back. We've now eaten through our entire error budget for the month in 3 days, and we're going to be at risk of basically having to hold our releases moving forward. And I think another example of that where you can be data driven, which I think is a great area, is chaos engineering. I think there's a lot of value, right, in doing disaster testing, chaos engineering, whatever you want to call it. But if you're not using SLOs on the other end of that, then how do you know if your system is resilient, right? You can play with some knobs and dials and see if it goes hard down or whatever, but it's at the margins that our customers experience our products. And that's where SLOs are really powerful, is understanding how those things change at the margins.
Excellent. I'm really curious. You mentioned transparency in SLOs. To someone like myself, if I was implementing SLOs, how transparent should you be? Should you also be transparent with the customer or the end user of what those SLOs are? I mean, you really put yourself out there and say, this is what we're working to meet.
It's a little dependent on your business. I think in general, you want to hold yourself to a higher standard internally than what you're actually messaging to your customer. So in my experience, we've created SLOs that are tighter than the SLAs, whether they're contractual or not, that we publish to our customers. So, you don't want to be in this position where you're at risk of violating your SLO. You're also at risk of violating an SLA and having a financial penalty, because you want some wiggle room, right, around that SLO. So we tend to set our, if you have a 99% uptime SLA with a customer, you probably want a 3.9 SLO on that availability to, again, give yourself that little bit of wiggle room, or maybe not 3.9s, but maybe 99.5.
Yeah, the more nines, the more expensive it gets. Both to get there as well as penalties.
Yeah, it's orders of magnitude. It's like the Richter scale.
It is. Well, very cool. What are you hoping to learn in the open beta? What are you hoping to get out of it? Obviously, you want to go GA, but what's that path look like?
Yeah, honestly, we want to learn more about the reliability of our own product, because one of the things that the SREs preach is it's very hard to learn about reliability without going through incidents. So you always need to be sort of actively running the software and having things go wrong and then fixing those things and automating those systems. And so you want to do that before you go to GA, or at least you want to get enough of that in so that you're not going to bring down a customer's production because they're relying on you for SLOs. So that's probably number one for us, is resiliency and reliability in the beta, and then of course testing out those features, making sure we don't have bugs, like all the things that you want to do in a beta in general. But in terms of the feedback we've gotten previously from a feature standpoint, feature function standpoint, we're in a pretty good spot with that. And so that's why we're so excited to have more people on the platform.
Excellent. One thing I might guess you're looking to accomplish, you can tell me if this is right. In the open source world, the people who choose open source also look at the company, or do they really believe and live and eat, breathe, sleep open source, right? Or is it just a delivery method for their product? I can imagine your customers are going to be looking at you and say, and I know given the background of you and others in the company, not going to be an issue more than likely, but they're probably looking at you to say, okay, they sell us this product, but do they live, eat, breathe, sleep SLAs?
Right.
SLOs, excuse me.
SLOs,
SRE, right? I can imagine.
Yeah. Do we understand what the issues are? And you're absolutely right. So obviously dog fooding our own product is important to us, right? We're tracking our own SLOs. We're so, I would say, lucky to have Alex Hidalgo with us, because again, he's bringing a lot of that culture in, not that we didn't have it before Alex, but, he just brings so much in terms of his background and knowledge, and keeps us honest day in and day out. So it's, it is something where, again, everybody from sales to the CEO is totally bought into the culture of reliability and SLOs. And, my personal feeling is that, reliability is one of the most, if not the most important features of a product like this. And so you have to measure it just like any other feature. And it's something that customers evaluate you on.
Well, great. Where can folks find out more, get involved in the open beta with Noble9?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, noble9.com. There's a sign up link right there. I think it's /signup. But if not, just go to the noble9.com/signup and just let us know you're interested, and we'll reach out and get you on the platform.
And Noble9 is NOBL9.com.
Correct. Just like on the shirt.
Just like on the shirt. Hey, if you're paying attention, it's on the shirt. Well, hey, I wish you the best. It's a great area to be in, and I'm sure you're going to learn a lot, but congratulations on getting to this stage of the company and the product.
Thanks, Mitch, and thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure talking with Brian Singer, Chief Product Officer with Noble9. Go check it out.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Great stuff today, Mitchell. Thank you so much. That's going to call a wrap on our special Election Day edition of TechStrong TV. If you haven't done so, get out and vote now. Can't be any more plain about it. Elections have consequences. We hope to see you Thursday, hell or high water, though. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel hoping you stay safe, stay well, stay strong, tech strong. We're out.